to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me this week... All right, that's not the starting point. It's good. See, it's at the beginning of the podcast. It doesn't matter if I start again.
Yep.
By the way, that is in 300 and whatever. That's the first time that's ever happened, which is kind of unbelievable. I'm not kidding. I mean, we've had to start over for a number of reasons, but never me having a blooper at the beginning of the goddamn podcast. Wow. Joining me this week? I tripped up on joining me because I never say this week. I always say tonight. That must be. I'll say.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I just, it's just muscle memory or lack thereof. Because, I have neither memory nor muscles. So there you go. All right, fine. I'll start on the 11-minute mark. So 10:55, 6. Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me tonight on this moderately momentous occasion, at least in the STVD universe, the crystal blue persuasion to my baby blue, our returning champion, Kevin Howard, is in the safe house. Hey, Kevin.
What's going on, Scott?
Not too much. This evening, I am remembering why I am not a big fan of recording podcasts in the summertime, and I know it's not technically summer.
Yeah.
I know I hate when people do that as well, but we're in like 80 plus degree weather now in New York. And the problem when I record a podcast is, well, I got to turn off all the fans and air conditioners in the house because this mic, even the crappy mic I used to have would pick that stuff up. And usually within like 12 minutes, I'm already feeling like all the sweat running down my back. I'm like, oh, great. It's awesome. So for me, I actually burn calories by recording a podcast. So why am I complaining? Anyway. Well, we have reached the end of the greatest TV drama episodes of all time countdown. And this is the part I'm going to actually combine two segments into one. So everybody can be super excited out there. As I have said 19 previous times, this countdown was not simply born out of my mind and my predilection over the years to concoct lists based on my own views or preferences or biases. Nope, this was actually involved hours of research stretched out over a few days where I pulled together well over a dozen articles, lists, ranking websites, everything that involved lists of the quote-unquote great TV episodes. In certain cases, I even drilled down to specific series multiple times to ferret out the truly best selection when it seemed like the difference between two or more picks was kind of razor thin. I also will acknowledge, first time, that not just on one occasion that I did make an executive decision to go with an episode that came in slightly behind two others, because I believe that episode was more emblematic of the series, Buffy. I also tossed out a couple other executive decisions that I had initially made earlier on, when I realized in both of those cases, going with the original selection that was dictated by the research, hey, that was the best way to go. That actually happened with both House and Battlestar Galactica. I thought it should be one way, and then I realized, nope, go with the research, go the other way. So, in addition to that drilling down, I had also determined there needed to be rules to stick to for this countdown. Really two. Number one, a series could only be represented once in the countdown, because many lists that I came across utilize that concept, but a bunch didn't. So that's why you're not going to get more than one Wire episode or Sopranos episode, or the series we're going to be chatting about tonight, of course. And number two, any episode that was already extensively covered and focused on for this podcast would be ineligible. So basically, that's why certain episodes of, well, Better Call Saul, or even possibly Legion or Fargo, did not lodge a slot here, not to mention that series finale of The Americans. It's also why, just last podcast, my Mad Men's The Suitcase was able to qualify despite inspiring some conversation on a podcast covering season 4 of Mad Men. But, episodes like The Strategy, Waterloo, or Person to Person could not qualify. Okay, disclaimer, over. That's also part of the story behind the countdown. The rest of the story would be, I realized last September, while we were podcasting about, I think it was both The Boys and Fargo, because they were roughly at the same time, I realized that odds were that we were going to have a considerable programming gap, that outside of the upcoming WandaVision and maybe The Crown, because I knew that both of those were going to hit late 2020 or early 2021, we probably weren't going to have any theories to talk about for a number of months. I hadn't even thought of the Queen's Gambit at the time. And also shows that did pop up this year that I didn't know about, like Invincible or Mayor of Easttown. But, none of those shows were on my radar during the high holidays of 2020. So I figured, and I got my Jewishness in there, see? So I thought, hey, an ongoing countdown might make for fun and even compelling listening. So for the previous 18 countdown podcasts, I've ended with a rundown of the countdown so far. I love that my neighbor who moved away this weekend, it just texted me like 17 times in the last 5 minutes. I keep seeing my phone buzzing around. Anyway, but now that we've actually hit number 1 on the countdown, I think it makes more sense to run down the list now and build up to numero uno, even though, you all know what it is already. I know I haven't said it yet, but, let's do it. Oh, by the way, Kev, feel free if you want to jump in and comment on any of the episodes as I go through these, because it will be the last time I mention all these episodes, which will be kind of nice for me. Oh, by the way, since I'm making like these are like the greatest of all time, and the acronym GOAT has become such a thing in recent years. Now, would it be super annoying if I like did this while I tick through every episode? It would be kind of. What do you think, Kevin?
Do it 8 times and then ask yourself again.
You know what? I'm imagining 8 times. Actually, I would love it, but I think no one else would. But it might be the Mr. Show kind of style, the repetition.
Those
joke.
are the best jokes.
Like the stools. The stools, not the stools. Thimbles. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yep.
The thimbles. Anyway, we'll see. So anyway, getting back to what the countdown has been, and obviously the first 5 didn't get their own podcast. I only mentioned them in a later podcast. Number 25. I can't keep doing that. Why We Fight from Band of Brothers. See how inappropriate that was right off the bat?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty horrific episode. I think a scream.
That's true.
Really sums it up.
That's true. Let's see what the audience thinks. No, they don't. Oh, that's the Soupy Sales show here. So number 24 was Who Goes There from True Detective. Number 23 was The Subway from Homicide: Life on the Street. Number 22, the first series finale, might be the only series finale on the list, I'm not sure, was Everybody's Waiting from 6 Feet Under. By the way, I do not actually think it's interesting that that's a series finale that made the top 25, but I do not think that is the best series finale, I
think I follow. Oh, yeah. It's like the weighted voting of the Oscars.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and by the way, I mean, I love that finale, but I love it more because of the last several minutes and the actual bulk of the episode, which, do I even remember the first 45 odd minutes? A little bit here and there, but it wasn't anything that great. I'm just saying. And then we flip from a series finale to the intro to a series with number 21, which was Days Gone By, The Walking Dead. I've said repeatedly, I always find it amusing that I think their first episode was their best episode. Because if I was knocking the show, which I'm not going to do out of deference to, someone from AMC here, it's almost unfortunate. Like, wow, it was all downhill from there. But no, there's plenty of good stuff in the first season, at least. So, I'm going to walk off this show. Anyway, number 20 was House's Head, from House. And I am still shaking my head that I had actually planned for that to be Wilson's Heart, simply because that was the second part of a 2-parter, which then when I went back, I was like, no, it's got to be House's Head. What was I thinking? Anyway.
Yeah, it's more of a mystery than Wilson's Heart.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's when House is at its best.
Right, exactly, because it's it's a Sherlock Holmes show essentially. Number 19, the 4th season finale of Dexter, The Getaway. Talk about everything starting to go downhill after an episode. Oof. Number 18 was Out of Gas from Firefly. Is that I think that's the only show that only has one. Oh no, well, Watchmen has an intended only one season. Firefly is the one that should have gotten more. What do we got? Number 17 was number 407, proxy authentication required from Mr. Robot. That was actually the first one on the countdown that I had a few legit contenders. I had to figure out how to whittle it down, so I had to run the numbers, so to speak. Number 16 was the second season finale of Hannibal, the one I constantly probably mispronounce as Mixumono. How else do you pronounce it? It's got to be it, right?
It's got to be it.
Yeah, whatever. I'll get letters in the mail from we actually have a couple listeners in Japan. They haven't complained yet. 15 was Hitting the Fan. I'm not kidding. From The Good Wife, which I always think of as being the first surprising choice from a series, because I think most people who are familiar with The Good Wife expected it to be Dramatics Your Honor. I understand why they thought that, but no, Hitting the Fan actually ranks higher. Number 14, Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose from The X-Files. I felt it kind of had to be that one. That was a no-doubter. Number 13 was the second season finale of Justified, Bloody Harlan. Although they did come up with a great final season for that show, the second season has to be the best season of that show.
Perfection.
It's just perfect. And once again, and probably one of the names that has been mentioned more on this podcast than almost anyone else, or at least any other female name, other than maybe Ray Seahorn, Margot Martindale. That's all you got. All you got to say. It's got Margot Martindale. Number 12.
Already in the glass.
She's so good. Now, number 12 was Crossroads Part 2 from BSG, which was the third season finale. There was a little finagling with that one as well. I had to be put on the right road to make, no pun, totally unintentional fun there, to get the right episode in there. Number 11 was This Extraordinary Being from Watchmen. Another one. People said there could have been at least one or two other episodes. I was like, yeah, I understand that, but it's not. It's this extraordinary being. Number 10, now we hit the top 10, was Sold Under Sin, the first season finale of Deadwood. This is the first series, I think, on the countdown where it's wow, it's really hard to separate them by great episode because it's just such a great series, and it has kind of The Wire is kind of like that as well. It's kind of think of it as just chapters in a book as opposed to a specific episode, if that makes any sense.
Yep. Totally.
But it's a great emblematic episode of the show, and it's probably one of the most momentous in how things change, because that's when Seth Bullock basically, he takes the badge in that one. Number 9, I would call it the first real no-brainer on the list for most other people other than me, was The Reigns of Castamere from Games of Thrones. Did I say Games of Thrones? Game of Thrones. I've hardly sipped the drink. I have no excuse. Number 8, Two Cathedrals, the second season finale of The West Wing. And let me tell you, there's nothing like doing a rewatch of The West Wing during all the election ridiculousness that was going on. During in December, because that's when I was watching a lot of West Wings getting ready for that. That was it's so presidents could be nice and respectful. I was oh wait, it's fiction. Shut up. Number 7 was Hush from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I already mentioned the Buffy controversy in my needless disclaimer before. Don't need to go into that again. Number 6. I think everyone expected this to be the one from The Sopranos. It was Pine Barrens. I thought it could have been another one. No, it's Pine Barrens.
Which other one might it have been? A particular other one?
I thought, personally, I thought it was going to be either the series finale. That's a series finale. Although I like the series finale, I thought it'd be the season finale from either seasons 1 or 2. And I thought people just defaulted to Pine Barrens, and then when I looked, after I did everything, no, it's pretty much Pine Barrens. I didn't call up Alan Sepinwall and get his opinion on it, so I don't know. He's all about The Sopranos, that guy. And speaking of shows he's all about, number 5 was from The Leftovers, International Assassin. Anyone who's watched The Leftovers, you pretty much would have guessed that was probably going to be the episode for that one. Number 4, Lost, another kind of obvious one for Lost fans, The Constant. I love that my co-host Jamie once I realized that she named her son Desmond after the character on Lost, I was like, well, you kind of have to co-host it with me, I guess.
Yeah.
I've just eliminated everybody else. No, you just trumped everybody else. Number 3 was Middle Ground from The Wire. That one just edged out final grades. And I watched them both and I was like, ooh, you can make a case either way, but Middle Ground just eked out ahead of final grades on that one. Number 2, the one I did with you, was The Suitcase from Mad Men. Pretty sure there wasn't really any debate about that. That if you're a Mad Men fan, that's like, yeah, it's a suitcase. Come on. And that finally brings us, of course, to number 1. And how long into the podcast did it take me to say what we're talking about? Which, of course, is Ozymandias, the anti-penultimate episode of Breaking Bad. By the way, I learned a new word because I had never heard the word anti-penultimate before. I'm probably mispronouncing it. But I actually Googled, hey, what comes before penultimate? And bingo. My brain.
I think that was from the TV guy on Ain't It Cool News coined that, like when he was writing about like 24, almost 20 years ago.
God, that guy. Oh.
So, yeah.
That wasn't
Herc.
Not Knowles, though, right? It wasn't him.
No, it was a guy called Herc. I don't know his real name.
All right. I feel dirty. So there you go. Now we can get to Breaking Bad. So, yay. Kevin gets to talk and do stuff.
Yay.
Shut up. All right. So, Breaking Bad. It ran for 5 seasons from early 2008 to the fall of 2013, compiling a pretty tight catalog of 62 episodes. I know fellow Breaking Bad fans, we all like to say tight, so we did that there. As everybody, Dan does it all the time. Breaking Bad was the brainchild of Vince Gilligan, of course, one of the several accomplished TV writers to come out of the X-Files. Now, if you're just a degree above casual fan of Breaking Bad, you already know that Gilligan has said from the very start that his idea was to create a series where the protagonist eventually becomes the antagonist. He's often been quoted as saying, turning Mr. Chips into Scarface. I always think it's funny he says that, by the way, because you're already assuming that the people that are hearing this or reading this are literate enough to know who Mr. Chips is.
Yeah, he's got to find a better good guy.
Because I kept thinking, it's like, I guarantee there's a couple generations of people that are like, they had a Google, they at the very least Google who Mr. Chips was.
Yeah.
Scarface, that's just, the Scarface. Mr. Chips, you gotta pick someone better than that. We could have had that be a whole section. What's a better pick? Anyway. So, and Kevin, let's face it is hard enough to get a show greenlit and made when it focuses on just like, say, an anti-hero as the main character, such as like The Sopranos or The Shield, or even as I more than half seriously like to say, even Mad Men. But selling an idea where the main character, someone that you're supposed to empathize with and are rooting for, with the idea that at some point you're going to question how you really feel about him. And eventually you may very likely hate him, or at the very least, find them, impossible to root for. How do you make that sale? Because especially in the TV medium, especially when you're dealing with, maybe not so much pay cable, but, a network, be it broadcast or like AMC's case, cable, basic cable, I should say, ad dollars. Usually that's not what you're looking for. At least it wasn't. Nowadays, I think everything's fair game. But back in the day, this is kind of major, I think.
Yeah, it's huge.
I mean, but the one thing that I think anyone who's like, a quote unquote student of TV can agree on, TV was just going through so many groundbreaking changes throughout the first decade of the 21st century. So I guess at that point, more networks, content providers, whatever you want to call them, are going to be willing to take a chance in such an idea. I happen to think it's both funny and rather bizarre that Showtime turns out to be one of the first networks that was offered a crack at making Breaking Bad. But it was the fact that they had just started airing Weeds, and they felt the premise was just too similar, so they passed. Okay. I actually watched Weeds. I'm going to put aside how bad I think Weeds actually got for its last few seasons, because that's not really important to this podcast.
Okay.
Between you and me, it was never as good as it was during the cul-de-sac years. But I'm just thinking, maybe I'm just thinking of TV in the last 10 years or whatever. I'm trying to imagine another network deciding not to move forward with a series because it was too similar to something else on their roster. Could CBS or NBC ever say anything like that?
No, the opposite.
No, because every other show, or even the CW for that matter, it's like, wait, is it DC with a superhero? Well, let's do it.
Yeah, it's the classic, like, wait, this is different from the thing I already know I like.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, look, I know if you break it down, the premise of Weeds, what was it? It's a parent who becomes a pot dealer at the Sporter family. And the premise of Breaking Bad is, hey, it's a parent, albeit one who's been diagnosed with terminal cancer, who realizes the best way to provide for his family after his death. Ain't going to make it on what's left over from a high school science teacher's salary in Albuquerque. And I think I'm hearing background noises from my neighbors, who, of course, were quiet for the last 2 hours, and now they're making noise. Terrific. But as opposed to a high school teacher's salary, it's going to be about producing and selling meth. There is a coincidence. The main characters in both do get into some hot water with both the DEA and, Mexican crime lords and whatever. But if you've watched either one, they're really not that similar. What's weird and scary is for a hot minute there, Gilligan was going to give up the whole thing because, it's too similar. And then, it took people, colleagues, other producers, Thomas Schnauz for one, had to convince him otherwise. Can you imagine that we could have lost Breaking Bad because of that show? No, I hate that show. Yeah. I'm just kidding. So the series did come close to landing at FX, but, instead, with the involvement of their then director of original programming, Jeremy Elise, AMC got involved. A year later, production commences on Breaking Bad. Oh, by the way, come on. I actually have a personal connection story or two involving Mr. Elise, but much like hey, Kevin, there's some things that you have to kind of keep quiet on. I probably should keep my mouth shut about this too, but I'll just say this. Hopefully he doesn't hear this. Executives may know a lot. They may quote a lot. They may be fine with giving notes and critiquing or whatever, but it turns out they are really not the best writers themselves. No. Just saying.
Understood.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you after the podcast if you care. Anyway, so let's get into our own views and perspectives on the series as we slowly make our way to Ozymandias. Now, I recall you said in the last podcast that you had actually started your gig at AMC the week of the final episode of Breaking Bad. So I'm curious. And I think I already know the answer, but I figure I'll let you expound upon it while I take a breath. Was Breaking Bad, was that a show that you would actually watch from the start? How soon did it become one of your preferred series? Has it gotten better or worse with age? What's your take?
I started very, very early on, not the pilot night, but my aunt, who's like old, but really into good TV, kept talking about it. And it was after the Cancer Man episode when she just said, he's got this really great monologue. You should really check it out. So it's like, all right. Couldn't figure out how to watch it. And then I realized, iTunes. So I bought the season. I think that's the 6th episode out of 8. And I watched all 6 of those pretty much in a night. And then I guess watched the first finale live. And then would rewatch with friends to get them ready for season 2. And then everyone I knew was watching it live every Sunday, starting from season 2 on. And then a few of my friends later were the ones who never cared about it at all, and then watched seasons 1 through 5A on Netflix. And then are telling me it's the greatest thing they've ever seen. I got to watch. I'm like, oh, cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, bandwagon jumper.
Yeah, well, I was totally a fan from really, really early on. It never dipped for me. And then even going back and rewatching it now, like one of my interviews was in the days leading up to the finale, like one of my final rounds of interview. I'm sitting there in the waiting area and like it's on TV and it's the 3 days out episode because they were doing a marathon leading into the finale. And
4 days out.
I was like, damn it. Oh, I'm glad I didn't say that on the day. I would have been, they wouldn't have given it to me.
Don't worry, I have two other corrections for you, but go on. I'm just fucking with you.
So what? Cancer Man is not the 6th episode, I'm guessing?
Right, it's the 4th episode. Go on with your story. Never mind me.
Yeah.
I'm muting myself.
But I haven't done a full rewatch, but I've popped in and out, or sometimes I'll need to find a particular bite or a clip that somebody wants to use in a promo, and I'm like, I kind of remember where that is, and I just pull it up and scrub through, and then, I find the line they're looking for, and I'm like, oh, it's, 18 minutes, 3 seconds, and then I gotta sit and watch the entire rest of the episode.
Well, yeah.
And watching this one again, I could not believe how tense and excited I got. It's got to be my 4th or 5th time seeing it.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Exactly. Same, probably same number of times I've seen it, same reaction. And what's fascinating, especially with this specific episode, and even to a lesser degree, the ones that come before and especially after it, I find, and this is also the mark of amazing television, whether it be Breaking Bad or anything else, but more so for Breaking Bad than anything else. You've already seen this. You already know what's going to happen. And yet there's parts of your brain that are actively hoping and thinking that there'll be a different outcome somehow. Even though that's not even possible. It's like, no, he's going to die or she's going to get shot or whatever it is. But it's like, that's fantastic. The way I look at it, there are so many, whatever you call aspects, factors that can attract a viewer and that can keep a viewer watching week after week, year after year. And, I think it goes without saying that Breaking Bad has a slew of, those qualities, facets on a gem. So, I'm just curious since you're talking about how you felt it never dipped, or so I know that you already feel it maintained a very high level of quality. Of course it did. So I'm curious, what's kind of like the main or major thing about the series that you feel really was what locked you in as a big fan all these years? And at the same time, is there something more on a minor scale that kind of also kept its hooks in you, that maybe an aspect of the show that people don't talk about as much or think about as much, but it's still kind of, oh, that's a major reason why I just fell in love with this show over the years?
I think part of it is there's a huge domino effect aspect to this show where something really tiny happens, and then over the course either of a scene or an episode or a season or the entire series, the implications of one little everyday happening become absolutely explosive. And sometimes that's when you're just watching somebody do something and you're kind of like, what the hell are they setting up right now? And then there's payoff like, oh, we saw the inkling of a trap that Walter was setting up. There are these moments where you're like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why that person's doing that, but I know it's going to be awesome when I find out why.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They do an excellent job of, how do I put this? It's kind of like the way they construct a web, so to speak. And and it's each strand is delicately placed, usually right from the start of a season, or maybe even a previous season, but definitely from the start of a season. And generally speaking, you might not know, or you just don't know where they're going. Because one of the things I love about Breaking Bad is they don't necessarily take the easy route. They don't necessarily ever take the obvious route. And I adore shows that seemingly write themselves into boxes and then find more and more ingenious ways to get out of them that never strain, at least for me, never strain credibility. And I think Breaking Bad does that possibly better than any show that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. Well, that was my favorite thing about The Shield. It was that every problem was solved with a new lie, and then that lie would get them into more trouble.
Right. The lies build up on one another, and that's what I think. That's how you would even get a phrase like, a house of lies. That's The Shield. That's the house. That's the house where Vic Mackey lives. Actually, it's funny. I actually skipped my own exposure to, of all people, how I first hooked onto the show. So I'll try to quickly nail it down. So I think I have mentioned it on the podcast in the past anyway. I might have mentioned probably back when we started covering Better Call Saul that I actually didn't discover Breaking Bad. I believe, and I actually kind of went through all the calendars on the internet. I realized it was a few weeks before my birthday in 2010, because it was around that time is when I found out that Bob Odenkirk, the guy that I love so much from Mr. Show, I'd even seen him perform live just a few years earlier, was playing a recurring character on Breaking Bad. I had no idea at this point. I did not know that. I apparently, I must have been, fast forwarding, those scenes when, cause I wasn't, no offense, I wasn't watching commercials during Mad Men, back then. So basically I soon pretty much got the discs from Netflix. I was back in the disc days, and I whipped through the first 20 episodes. Because it was in between seasons 2 and 3. So it was like the 7 episodes of season 1 and then the 13 is for season 2. And season 3 kicked off, first day of spring, March 21st, 2 days before my birthday. And by the end of that season, by the end of season 3, that's what it took for Breaking Bad to be officially declared. Okay, bye-bye Lost. This is now my favorite series.
Wow.
And we hadn't even gotten into all the exponentially wow-inducing moments, for the next few seasons. The other aspect of the show that I would have mentioned, because I think it goes without saying, and it's probably going to find its way throughout our conversation about our admiration for whether it be the performances or the writing and so on and so forth. I kind of want to just give a shout out to something that doesn't get talked about quite as much. And I know if Dan were here, we'd probably spend some time talking about the cinematography, which Breaking Bad, I think, excels in, no doubt. But it's the music for me and the soundtrack and the way they use sound on Breaking Bad. I think it's the best of any TV series in that regard. I can't think of anything better than Breaking Bad. It's just what they do to inspire tension, especially like in Ozymandias, what you were talking about before. I mean, even if you watch that promo that I placed on Facebook earlier this week, that AMC had done to promote the final run of Breaking Bad episodes back in 2013, the one that had Bryan Cranston reading the poem Ozymandias, which that alone is great because it's Bryan Cranston. Come on. But it's the music, it's the soundtrack that gives it such ominous, chill-inducing feelings. I like if the hairs are standing, even thinking of. Well, no, they're not. But we'll pretend they are. But it's
tonal, it's drones, it's the percussion, and it's all moody and. There's a moment in Ozymandias that I had never noticed before. I think we'll get to the phone call, but you don't even realize that what you're hearing is the music. I don't remember the exact moment, but it goes from like a sound effect into just this tone, and it happens so subtly that you're just building the tension with it. You're like, ugh.
Right. I mean, it's, I believe it's Dave Porter, I think, right? Who handles it masterfully. And what you're talking about in that moment and throughout certain specific episodes that call for it, I think of it as almost like discordant chords, if that, where it's just, just like, I don't know if someone's just keeping their finger on a keyboard somewhere or how he's done it, it always works. And it's just one of those things that I've always been so impressed by. And it's being, a fan of both film as well as television, it's the kind of thing that you just, when you notice it, it's like, oh, that's really something. It's kind of, I think we might have had this conversation, in our, in a bar one time, how I admired the use of sound in, say, many Christopher Nolan movies, for example, because he seems to be someone who's like very aware of how to use sound and how to get the most of it, and I think he might have gotten that from directors like, even like Michael Mann was someone who was like really into the use of sound as well, and soundtracks and whatever. So I feel I kind of put them all together in my mind. There's a similarity, but yet very different.
I will mention the promo that you mentioned, where Cranston reads the poem. That was actually the show's idea. AMC didn't even produce it. The show said, hey, we have this 30-second read of the poem. Let's run this as a promo. And the promo department was like, yeah, it's perfect. We'll package it up and air it.
Excellent. I was wondering about that because obviously they use a lot of what's the exact phrase for it? The high-speed photography, time-lapse photography.
Oh, the time-lapse.
Photography. In that, which is kind of one of those little trademarks of the show. Anyway, and I thought it was interesting the way they use it in that because you're having a poem that's being read very deliberately, as it should be. That you wouldn't speed read Ozymandias or most poems for that matter, unless you're Lin-Manuel or something. I like to hear it anyway. But in a weird way, there's almost kind of a juxtaposition of the deliberate slow reading of the poem and the frenetic photography of, different aspects of the desert and the mountains and everything. It's a really beautiful little piece that they put together. It really works. If I was going to feature a clip of something in this podcast, I probably would have done that instead of the actual episode, but I didn't. Anyway. All right. So, speaking of things that we've talked about on this podcast in the past, we've actually spoken a hell of a lot about anti-heroes over the years on this podcast. And oftentimes it was usually part of some bigger conversation. Either someone would character name drop a Tony Soprano or, hey, we already did it, Vic Mackey. Or as I like to say, I don't think it should be a controversial belief, but I say Don Draper is definitely an anti-hero as well. But now that we've reached the end of the countdown and we make it to Breaking Bad, we have Walter White. So my question for you, Kevin, is Walter White an anti-hero, or is he just a straight-up villain and we just watched his descent into villainy over 5 years? And, those of us who might choose to analyze his character can even say the seeds of his potential evil can be found all the way back to the early days of gray matter. And I was one of those people, so I don't know why I'm making fun of myself. Or do we not feel he's ever truly evil, but chose to substitute, whatever substitute adjective works best for you? Misguided, delusional, power mad, whatever. Mm-hmm. How do you view him as far as an anti-hero, and how do you feel about that?
So I don't think of him as an anti-hero because to me, an anti-hero is somebody who's consistently, steadily acting against social norms, but not with that descent that Walter White is on. He's on a downward slope. I feel like your normal anti-hero is a little more level. It's like somebody like Lucifer. I wouldn't think he was a villain all along, except for what he says at the end of the finale, which is that he did it for him. If it weren't for that line, I would think he started off good and just corroded.
Mm.
But knowing that he liked it, I think he was a villain all along and wasn't, an anti-hero is more like a vigilante. There's a greater cause. And yeah, he has the cause of looking after his family, but as he says, it was about something besides that.
Right. Interesting. I probably differ from you somewhat to a certain degree, in just my own personal definition of what makes an anti-hero. Mm-hmm. Only because therefore certain characters would not qualify, and I feel they kind of have to. I think maybe it might be one of those situations where, and I don't mean you specifically, of course, because you're so smart. But but people in general, sometimes they hear a word that has a specific, a general meaning or connotation, and therefore you can't apply it to certain. So if you hear a word like hero as part of anti-hero, therefore, well, you can't ever call Tony Soprano a hero. He's certainly not a hero, so I can't call. It's like, yeah, but that's not what hero technically means. Hero doesn't mean someone who saves the day,
So if we're talking protagonist whose goals are not on the up and up, yeah, anti-hero.
Right. So with Walter White, I feel like so many characters in the overall Breaking Bad universe, he's someone who's been constantly changing or evolving. I don't know if evolve is even the right word, but while the spine of what he is, of what his character is, I felt has always remained intact or the same. I think the question becomes, while the character, like Walter White, he may keep his spine, does he lose his soul? And then therefore, by the end of the series, is that what he's trying to recapture? Because in really super simple terms, I would posit he goes through phases. I think Walter White starts out as an everyman. He's an average Joe. He's us. In his life, he's respected by some, less by others. He plods his way, doing shifts at the local car wash to supplement his teacher's salary and so on and so forth. Then Mr. Regular Guy gets hit with the worst news imaginable. You're gonna die. And guess what? The joke is on you. You're gonna die from a terminal disease that's most associated with smoking, and you weren't even a smoker. Mm-hmm. That's, by the way, that's really being kicked where it hurts. So his initial plan, which is as Machiavellian as it gets, and by the way, all those other anti-heroes usually, especially the ones who commit specific illegal activities, that's totally Machiavellian, whatever. And so, as well as a certain lawyer that we're not talking about as of yet, it was still initially sounding kind of noble. He had even come up with an exact number that he needed to make in order to guarantee his family's financial security, son's college, whatever. So yes, he did undertake an illegal activity, but we understood why, and we were more than willing to absolve him of any sin at that point. So it's a phrase, again, we've said it, I think it came up even in our last podcast, and God knows, I've said it 1,000 times about Jimmy McGill. You're dealing with a guy who's doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. At least that's the setup initially. What you're saying about what he says at the end, when he finally flips it, my take on that is that there's a certain point where that happens. That point is not the very beginning, though. I think we can kind of trace back when we see that turn happen. I don't recall I don't have the title of the episode in my head, but I know it's in that parking lot when he goes and threatens those guys who are moving in on his action.
Oh, at the Home Depot or whatever.
Yeah, at the Home Depot. Yep. I think that's kind of the moment. But going back to the whole, hero or anti-hero, whatever. I mean, when he back in season 1, when he first proclaims himself to be Heisenberg, it's practically a heroic act at that point. He's freaking Batman. at that point on the show. But then you get into the second season, rolling along. His diagnosis improves. He lets Jane die, and then we're left to wonder: did he allow that to happen to divert Jesse off of the strung-out junkie road that he was heading down, or did he do that just to save himself? Because obviously Jane was going to be a constant blackmail threat to him. You start questioning it. And then, but even after dealing with Tuco, and then we get into the third season, into the fourth one, because he's dealing with threats from Mexico and Gus Fring, everything's clawing away at his psyche. Throughout all this, I think that's the phase where I would say, oh, this is where he's shifted from hero to anti-hero. We're still rooting for him against this opposition, but we're starting to cringe more and more from his more, let's say, more cold-blooded either acts or thoughts or commands or however you want to look at it. But I think we find it somewhat easy to wave him off because we get those moments that we still find ourselves cheering up, like when he runs down those guys who are going to kill Jesse, But so that helps us be able to stomach the way he forces Jesse to kill Gale. It's awful, but we get it, because it's about self-preservation for both of them at that point. But it's that final episode in the fourth season, we're at the end, when we're still aglow from the way he was able to win, against Gus Fring. It's when he speaks to his wife, and then the reveal that follows it, that he apparently had poisoned a child. and to basically really just to achieve his ultimate goals by getting Jesse on board with them. That's where it's like, yeah, we've just flipped the page. We've gone hero to anti-hero. Now you're a villain. Now, I think as we go into season 5, he's a villain through season 5, and I think the finale, he probably wants it to be somewhat redemptive, but I don't think it is. By the way, if I called him Batman before, he probably shifted from being, from Batman to the Punisher, and now he's Lex Luthor. So I'm just giving you comic book characters, because, the bald thing really works. And the thing, I think that, there's so many smart things that Gilligan and all the writers under him and Gould and everyone else does to kind of like throw little distractions at us so we'll stay, locked into the story. We'll go, oh my gosh, look how awful that dead-eyed Todd is, when he kills a kid. Oh my gosh, we've got Nazis now? What could be worse than Nazis? Though outside of a couple of tattoos, they never really do anything all that Nazi-like. But anyway, other than killing, I guess. But we're able to look back on an episode like the one we'll be talking about, Ozymandias, and you think, these are the horrible consequences your bad decisions have wrought. And that's what, if you're just looking at Ozymandias by itself. But hey, we forgot just an episode earlier. This was all about Walt trying to kill Jesse.
Yeah.
And I think that also sets up the whole thing where he's become a villain to a certain degree, because the essential final season versus or conflict that the series comes down to is Walt versus Jesse. It's not Walt versus Hank. Sorry, Hank. I love you, Hank, but it ain't about you. So I know I've said a lot here, and some of it was needless, but I like talking about Breaking Bad. And even keep in mind, the episode we're talking about here, that after all the horrors he sees in the desert with, his own treatment and what they do to Hank and how horrible it is, he's still unflinchingly awful and just pretty much evil to Jesse, even telling him how he let Jane die.
Yeah.
At that point, it's like, oh, you're a super villain. Again, I know we're not. We'll talk, but we'll talk about it, the finale, whatever. I question if he's ever actually redeemed in the finale, because what you pointed out, what he says to Skylar, on one hand, I like the fact. I think many people like the fact that, like, okay, he's not in denial anymore. He's accepting this is who he is.
Okay. Yeah.
But by the same token, does that also kind of remove him from, you can't be redeemed now. That's pretty much it. It's sorry. I mean, by the time you get to him lying on the floor in that lab, has Walter White been redeemed or not?
No.
Even though he saves Jesse. No, I agree. And again, hand it to Gilligan because that is a gutsy decision, because you'd almost like, okay, we're going to do that because, unlike say a Vic Mackey and what happens at the end of S.H.I.E.L.D., one could have posited I said posited twice in one podcast, that Walter White was one of us and he was led astray. And by the end, he's back to being one of us again. And in fact, no, not really. I mean, I guess you could say he feels guilty when he sees what's happened to Jesse and he asks Jesse to kill him, or that he could say he saved Jesse when he was laying on top of him when the machine gun is strafing the house and everything.
Yeah.
But it's really a hard sin. I think a hard sell. Again, it's just like what he said to Skylar. He's owning his sins. I appreciate that, as opposed to the lie he kept spreading about, I did it for my family. And yeah, that stopped in mid to late season 2, dude. We that train left the station a long time ago. But that's why that's one of the reasons I really love the finale. Is like they didn't take the easy way out. They didn't try to redeem him or anything like that. And quite frankly, the reason why he even gets up and comes back to New Mexico initially seems to be totally based out of ego anyway, because he doesn't like the way Gretchen and Elliot were talking about him on that TV on Charlie. Oh God,
Charlie.
There was something that didn't age well. Anyway, okay. So my feeling as far as Walter White being an anti-hero, the way I say it is like, I say Walter White is an anti-hero for roughly 27 to 28 episodes worth of Breaking Bad. And so out of 62, so a little less than half. So that's how I would look at it. Yeah. Oh boy. So one of the things I've mentioned about Walt, someone who went through many changes and phases and things like that. I think that's something you can actually probably make the case or say that about all the major players, all the principal characters of the show. Jesse, Skylar, and Hank, actually. So I'm curious, which of those, if we just keep it to those three, I mean, I guess you could, if you want to expand to someone else, if you want to put Marie in there, you could, I guess. I don't know. We'll get into my anti-Marie rant later. I'm just curious, of those three, let's call them character journeys, which one did you find to be the most, satisfying, compelling, whatever? And I'll give you bonus points if you actually surprise me. Because you have surprised me before. So I'm kind of thinking he'll probably surprise me again.
Maybe this will surprise you. So one of the journeys was actually my own in relation to Hank. My own as a viewer, because you start out, it's like, oh shit, Hank, he's going to ruin everything. But then by the end, he's the one you want to win. And since you've already flashed forward to Walt in the future, Hank didn't win. And he's the tragedy of the show. But in terms of actual character arc and seeing somebody change and mature, it's Jesse, hands down. He's a fuck up at first. And then every once in a while, he'll have a little glimmer of an idea. Like he'll do the House thing, like when House looks at a toaster and then figures out how to cure somebody. But like Jesse he'll misuse a word like Cow House, or like he'll just throw something out there that flicks a switch in Walt's head. And it's like, oh, there's value in you. And then as he goes on, like you see this guy become a man. You see him as somebody who could support a family. There's a lot of stuff he's got to stop doing before he can do that. But you actually see the potential in him.
Yeah, absolutely. he is someone that we basically see grow up on the series, like you were saying, you know. And it's interesting that even though when the series starts out back in season one, you know, at that point what is he? He's like a little small time hustling drug dealer guy. And although he's involved, obviously, therefore he's involved in drugs and crime, I would still say he's kind of like a wide-eyed innocent.
Yeah.
But when you look at what's about to happen to him from season to season, you know, it's funny. Like, I think in season 2, there's that Jesse has a really bad day episode, right? And then you think, oh my God, it's like the worst day ever. Oh, don't worry. You're going to have much worse days than that. You're falling into a porta potty is going to be a breeze compared to what's going to happen next season. But yeah, everything you said is spot on as far as Jesse is concerned. And it's interesting. It's kind of like what you were saying about how you can look back on earlier moments where he says something. It's kind of like he comes up with an idea without even realizing it, as you say. Cowhouse. Yeah. I forgot all about Cowhouse. I love it. But then you like, say you fast forward to it at a certain point that, like, I think it's at the beginning of the 5th season, you know, when Walt and, Mike are arguing, and what's Jesse doing in the background? He keeps trying to interrupt them, saying, you know, what about magnets? What about, he has the idea. He has the exact right idea from the get-go. I love that it's a science idea. That's usually, you know, and then we get the great, you know, magnets. Yeah, fuck. Whatever. I just love the magnet thing. It's so awesome. So that wasn't who I thought you were going to pick. So you did kind of surprise me. Skylar would have been the biggest surprise of all, of course. I'll go with the one that first occurred to me was Hank. Because we do such a immediate, unexpected left turn with Hank from season 1 to season 2. Because, you know, season 1, he's basically an arrogant loudmouth. You know, and in a lot of ways, he feels like a character that we've kind of seen before to some extent. And, you know, and you go, oh, whatever. And then when we get into season 2, you know, after the shootout and everything, when we realize he's basically dealing with, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder from what happened with Tuco and everything. And so you see how the fragility of the man. And there's something great when you have a character that's filled with bluster and then you see their weaknesses. For someone like that, it worked really well. And also gave me an all new respect for Dean Norris's performance of the character as well. Then, you know, then we bounce to season 3 and you get, you know, not only one of the best episodes of the series, but the whole, you know, with what happens after 1 minute and, you know, cause he's a cop, you know, he nearly loses his life. And then somehow he goes, you know, from season 3 into season 4, he basically becomes like a gimpy Sherlock Holmes. You know, which is what leads him eventually to, you know, be sitting on the toilet and figuring out it's Walter White. You know, that's quite a journey.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, you know, he does have, it's absolutely tragic, whatever, but he is the one character who gets to go out as kind of almost a true hero, even to the very end. Anyway, Dean Norris kind of just, like I said, I was just shocked because I just didn't expect it from that character, and I kind of took it for him and the actor for granted. So as the series moves along, I realized, wow, this is a great character and this is a great performance, you know, and I will never think of Minerals the same way ever again. So, when we talked, I guess just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about Mad Men, and one major aspect of that show, and of course the episode that we were focusing on, was that relationship between Don and Peggy, and how in many ways at several, I guess, critical junctures, I guess, if the series didn't expressly revolve around that dynamic, it always came back to it. And, you know, and from start to almost finish, they had set up, a teacher, pupil, mentor, student I don't know, Jedi Padawan for the geeks out there, relationship that was at the core of that show. I'm not going to say pause it again, but I will say, I think it goes even more so for Walt and Jesse. I mean, that relationship is the core of this series. I think, from season 1 right up to the very end. And like all other really, truly great series, that core relationship is split apart, which ends up putting them in opposition to each other, as we get to the very end of the series. And one might say, well, that didn't exactly happen with Mad Men, but I would say, kind of happened just earlier on in Mad Men, and they just found their ways back to each other. But if you think of any other series that has that kind of core thing, it often comes down to that. I mean, some of them are, basically every series that Walton Goggins has ever been on, apparently. So, I mean,
well, Jesse is the only one who's literally seen every aspect of Walt, because he was in Walt's classroom.
That's right.
He knows him directly as high school teacher. Even Skylar never had him as a high school teacher, and he's seen him at home at the dinner table, and he's seen him kill. And nobody else has witnessed all the aspects. I mean, they never had sex. I'll give you that one. So Skylar's got one up on him there.
I was not going to say that.
in terms of observing the man as a whole, Jesse's seen everything.
That is spot on, sir. And when I think, and it's interesting when I think of certain other characters. You know what? One of the reasons I really like the way that works, in a weird way, it kind of makes me happy about making the otherwise very bizarre parallel between these two and Don and Peggy. Mm-hmm. Because in a weird way, Peggy's kind of seen everything about Don too, except for the sex part. But but everyone has just assumed she has, or basically. Seen you at your best, seen you at your worst, seen you reveal things that no one else knows about. Because he's a person that very few people ever really get to know.
Right.
Especially anyone. In fact, usually anyone who's actually involved with him usually doesn't get to know him unless you're some weird waitress somewhere. Don't get me started. But, do a whole podcast just on that damn waitress character. So, speaking of characters, with all this talk of characters, let's just knock out one of the more obvious pieces of business that we're going to do. You know it's coming. Kevin, who's your favorite character? And you can make it a trio. Oh, one right. So, boom, Mike. Look at that. Look how fast, Mike.
100%.
You got two more. Do you have a couple others just to fill it out? You gave us 3 for Mad Men. You got 3 for Breaking Bad, or are you gonna go Mike?
Yeah,
Mike?
It's I could easily go Mike, but second is Walt, just because he's so very watchable. Every single thing he does, just watching the man calculate. I love watching people who are really good at something, and that's what Mike and Walt both do. I love seeing things get figured out. Now, my third, it's a tie between two pretty much idiots. It's Skinny Pete and it's Todd.
Todd, I didn't see Todd coming. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
One. Nice.
And part of that is just a Jesse Plemons thing. I mean, I loved Friday Night Lights, so to see him go from that to Todd is hilarious.
Right. Oh,
but but now, he's Todd.
I tried to explain to a couple people who had not seen Friday Night Lights. And I got into Friday Night Lights. I was kind of one of those after the fact people for the most part, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. I might have watched the 3rd season while it was on and caught up on the first 2. I don't remember. It didn't stick in my head the way Breaking Bad, because, monumental. Anyway, my point being, I had to explain to people no, you don't understand how weird this Todd thing is. If you'd seen the show Friday Night Lights, you'd understand. It would be like if the first time you ever saw Christopher Walken was in Catch Me If You Can, or Pennies from Heaven or something. Wow, there's a pull.
Yeah.
It's like, and I would be like, no. You don't understand how weird it is. He's usually this, this kind of, this weird, cool, psychotic creep, Todd, that's a good one.
Mike, I mean, I always love the character of the fixer, or the cleaner, whether it's Leon or it's Michael Clayton. But Mike just also physically and verbally reminds me of a friend of mine. It's his birthday today. Rest in peace, Bob. But he's the guy you would call if you needed to move a body, and he would show up, he would do it, and you'd never hear about it again. And he would never come calling for a favor. Mike is just a man of principle, and he knows how to do things. And whether it's like handiwork, as you see a lot of on Better Call Saul, even more, or if it's just philosophy, where, just because you shot Jesse James, don't make you Jesse James. Or if it's just like this weird morals and ethics, as we also see on Better Call Saul, where it's like, it's not my money, or you hired me to do a job, I did the job.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely perhaps certainly more so than anyone in Breaking Bad, someone with a code. And that's something always to be respected. It's why we can love characters on a show like The Wire, like an Omar, because you got a code.
Got a code.
Or even even Dexter. So for me, well, here's the thing. I could get all fringe character goofy here, and I could just go with Skinny Pete would have been a good one. By the way, I know when you said Skinny Pete, you were thinking of him playing the piano. I that moment when Skinny Pete just in the story and he's playing piano, you go, oh wow. That's, by the way, I don't know enough about that specific episode. I never watched any of the behind the scenes for it or anything like that. So I don't know if that was always planned or if it was an idea that even maybe the carrot. I would hope. I almost want the actor to have come up with the idea, and so I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I just love that little bit of color to make it because something like that makes me go, oh, what could have been.
That's one of my favorite things about that is it's this very subtle, non-judgmental, just drugs message where it's like, oh man, look what this guy did instead.
Right, exactly. So I'm derailing my own thing just to go back to your Skinny Pete there. So I could have gone with Skinny Pete or Badger. Oh, I love Badger so much. I mean, whether it be the when we first see him with Odenkirk, in that episode, or even some of those little webisodes that were with Badger that are hysterical. Actually, I know the guy's he's actually a stand-up himself. He kills every time he's on screen. I could even go or could have went with Gale. Gale would have been a fun one to do.
Oh, Gale, yeah.
Or everyone forgets to, what about Tortuga? Because look, they got 10. But no, I'm not going to do any of that. Number one, for me, I'm not going to be cute. Let's get it out of the way. There's no way I can't say it's Walter White. It has to be Walter White.
Yeah.
Everything you already said. And we're going to be saying quite a bit more. So there's no reason for me to give you any reasons. But this is the first time I'm going to be talking about this in the podcast. To take a drink. I'm going to tell you guys out there, there's something you can check out when you can. Apparently I wrote a whole bunch, I didn't know. I wrote a whole bunch of actually not half bad blogs over 7 years ago. One of them was actually a nice little recap examination of the episode we're going to be talking about tonight. And you can bet your ass I'm going to be using it as my blueprint for that. But and another one was infamous or glorious, depending on your perspective, about the best Breaking Bad episodes. I'll be tapping into that one later too. 7 years ago, I did all the research for this podcast. So 7 years in the making, man. But when I was tracking down all these ambitious lists, I've referenced this one before. I did a 4-part series, and there was one I did back in January of 2014. And it was, oh God help me. It was my top 50. That's right, 50. 50 most memorable leads. It even had the subtitle, Heroes, Villains, and Anti-Heroes, Oh My, right? 50 through 1, a little blurb about each character, whatever. Sometimes there's a GIF, sometimes there's a picture, sometimes there's a clip. I went all the nines. So I will be what I'll do is, I'll probably pop the link under the podcast when we post this on the Facebook page, and maybe I'll tweet it as well. It's actually shockingly worth it. Guess who's number 1?
Is it Walter?
So when I saw that, it's like, well, I can't very well not pick him, can I? And by the way, so the joy is not seeing who number 1 is. It's finding out who 50 through 2 is, because there are actually, when I was going through, I was like, oh wow, I'm surprising myself here. Holy crap! I picked number 5. Really? Anyway, you'll see it. I mean, you probably won't see it, but people out there might see it. And I'll do the same with the 25 Breaking Bad episode things as well. Blah blah blah. All right. Once I get past Walter White, I hate myself for doing this. I can't not pick the main 2 who ended up on Better Call Saul. I got to go with Mike and Saul. I actually wrote down Mike, Saul, and Gus, but it's supposed to be, I said 3, so sorry, Gus. So it's got to be Mike and Saul. And maybe that's why that show actually turned out to work out so well. It's like, look, you took 2 of the in my mind, 2 of the 3 best characters. No, it's got to work. Right. So yeah, I mean, everything you said about Mike, 100-fold for me. And I can watch him build something for several minutes and find it so compelling. And either I know what it is he's doing or not. It's just, you might not know till next week what the hell he was making in his garage. Yeah, I mean, he's MacGyver if it was well written. It's just so. And the fact is, Jonathan Banks, he's been around a long time, but all the other roles I can think of that I've seen him in, at least earlier in his career, aren't like this, but there was always a nice stability to him. I mean, he's kind of a schmucky guy. If you go all the way back to like Beverly Hills Cop, he's an excellent supporting player in the needs to be seen more, but it's really hard to find anywhere show Wise Guy. He's actually really excellent on that. And there was some weird show which I never completed. I don't know if they pulled it and they didn't finish running it. Do you remember there was a show several years ago on ABC called, the hell was the title of it? It wasn't Daybreak. He was on it. And
Daybreak was the one with,
Tay.
It was Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it was like Tay Diggs or something.
Yeah, it was Tay Diggs.
And they kept repeating the day, and he kept trying to find different ways around it to I don't know if it was to save his own life or to prevent a murder or whatever the heck it was. And Jonathan Banks turns out to be one of the antagonists or whatever. And I kind of get into that kind of thing. And I never got to see how they finished it or if they finished it. So.
I don't think the final 2 episodes ever aired. And then they might have thrown them on back to back one night and not said anything. Like they do with Karen Cisco. Where it was it was canceled, and then one day they just aired them all on a Sunday afternoon or something.
I see. One of these days I'll track that thing down because it's actually pretty good.
It's out there, I think.
Yeah, it's somewhere.
But I mean, the thing about Mike, we wouldn't have had him except Bob had something else to do a certain week and couldn't shoot that scene.
Right.
So they're like, all right, we'll create another character. And he's like the greatest one of all time.
I love the fact that bizarre things that would seem to almost be potential ruinous moments for the series actually were a huge boost to the series. In fact, that's one of there's 2 that I always think of, and that's one of them. The fact that we wouldn't have had a Mike if it wasn't for Odenkirk not being able to do that scene. So it's okay, we'll create a new character and and I always thought of him as when we first him, oh, he's like the wolf from Pulp Fiction kind of a guy. I get it. Cool. Whatever. And also, I mean, I know and probably maybe some of our listeners know the whole thing.
I may dispute it if it's what I think you're going to say.
The season 1 thing?
Yeah.
You want to dispute it before I say it?
I don't know who to believe. I don't know what the truth is anymore.
You think?
But I've heard both sides.
You think it
about how the writer's strike shortened the season, and therefore Jesse did not die like he was supposed to?
Well, I think now Gilligan has said it was going to be either. See, I had always heard it was Jesse, and then I read somewhere.
Did I say Jesse?
You said,
or
Jesse.
did I say?
No, you said Jesse. Okay. You were right. Okay. But I've heard. I was reading recently. He said Jesse or Hank, which also would have been kind of a weird impact on it. Not as major, perhaps, as Jesse, obviously, because of what we've been talking about already. I could see that being one of those, and I say this all the time about certain things, kind of one of those little, it's the Hollywood version of an urban legend, It's kind of like, oh, we were shooting the end of Casablanca, we hadn't even written the ending yet. It's like, shut up. Or I think Robert, you probably know. You actually read the book. I only have it on my night table, so you probably know this one. The Chinatown also.
Yeah.
There's all these, about the ending they had, like, no, that's bullshit. Don't be that. There's no way.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, it's probably all true that at some point, all of these things were discussed in the writer's room, and then they just had to pick one. Because you don't just sit down and write start to finish. You get to episode 6's storyline, and then you realize, oh, we got to go back and change this thing in episode 1 so that this makes sense or that this is better. But luckily, you haven't shot it yet, so you can do whatever you want.
Right. And let's face it, Gilligan's a little known for this because, I mean, he's the guy who said, oh, we just had the gun in the back of the car. We didn't know what we were going to do with it. We just figured we'll figure it out later. It's like, really? You didn't know what you're going to do with it? Really? I've seen the shot. I don't believe you. I'll go along with it, but I'll believe that you hadn't worked out all the details yet, but you knew where this was going. I'm sorry. Once you introduce Nazis, you know where this is going to go. I don't believe you otherwise. The one I talked about it about a month or two ago, I'll sidetrack just for a moment. One of the famous ones, as far as TV shows on this countdown are concerned, we usually go back to Lost and how originally, Michael Emerson was only supposed to be on for a few episodes during season 2. And then they said, oh, because of the fan reaction or blah, 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 we realized we had lightning in the bottle. Then we changed. And I was like, no, I have a hard time believing you. I don't, again, it might be true, but I just don't think so. Just because, I don't believe anybody. So we've covered our favorite characters. Let's take care of the other obvious thing that I do with these shows, and it's a fun one for this one. What's your favorite season?
It's got to be 4, because that's the season for me that's most consistently holy shit, edge of your seat. I feel nauseous. Oh my God, I can't wait for next week. Season 3 approached that. You had Gail, you had Gus, but season 4, like when Gus is the bad guy and you do not know what the hell is going to happen, it's pretty much perfection start to finish for me.
Solid choice. Cannot disagree with it. I mentioned that top 25 Breaking Bad episodes list I had done.
Yeah. How many?
I was so torn between not just 2, but 3 different seasons, but really 2. I thought, okay, I don't know how to figure this out. Let me go to that list. Let me do it like I did the countdown, actually. Let me break it down. Let's see, hey, which season ended up with the most episodes in my top 25? Because I looked at the list. I said, would I change my mind about any of these? I went through. I was like, no, I'm pretty. I think my opinions pretty much are the same. So yay on that. That I don't change apparently. Done. I guess I'm Don Draper now. No, not true. Anyway, so looking at the top 25. Okay, so season 1 had 3 episodes. I knew it wasn't going to be season 1. Season 2 had 5 episodes, which kind of surprised me. I was like, wow, I didn't realize I liked that many in season. Season 5 had 5 episodes. And fucking 3 and 4 both have 6 episodes. It was going to come down between 3 and 4 for me anyway. Drove me crazy. So I was like, okay, let me drill down a little bit more. I started doing like, oh, maybe if I do how many are this? What's the average ranking? So I was like, what score would they get? And I was like, okay. So basically I think, season 3 scores a little bit higher than season 4, but then I couldn't help myself. I took it a little further. I was like, well, if I use that as my method, technically season 2 and 5 rank higher than those two. So I can't do that. I just kind of went back and forth, and then finally I went, this has been a running thing for the last couple podcasts. The Wire, I was torn between seasons 3 and 4. Mad Men, I was torn between seasons 3 and 4. And now, once again, I'm torn between seasons 3 and 4. I was almost going to say season 4 like you did, for the reasons you gave. Especially, oh my God, those final 4 episodes of season 4 are, and for kids out there, folks, not so old, but yet old folks like me and Kevin, we were watching it on a week-to-week basis. We couldn't binge it.
Yeah, you had to wait.
Can you imagine those episodes? And you had to wait a week.
As like Optimum was having fights with AMC, so you didn't even know if you would have AMC that week.
Oh my God. Oh Lord. But it's a hair. It's a hair.
Yeah.
It's a hair on Saul Goodman's head, so it's not even that good a hair. I'm actually going to go with season 3, just like I did with Mad Men. I was just thinking about it, and I was so close to going with season 4, and my main reason would have been, oh my God, the tension. Oh my God, the tension of season 4. But then I looked at season 3 and went, oh, the cousins, the pizza on the roof, the whole being trapped in the trailer thing. Oh my God, that scene in the hospital bed. Oh, and our 1 minute in The Fly. Oh, I know it's just Fly, but I always say The Fly, whatever. Okay, the half measure monologue, which I have maintained might be the best monologue I've ever seen, TV wise, and possibly film. I just think it's amazing. Whatever.
Well, just like that's what the money's for. It's one of those lines that I worked into my everyday professional life.
Nice, very nice.
No more half measures.
And I will go back to what I said earlier in the podcast, and I realize that's why it has to be season 3. Season 3 is what made me fall in love with the series, and that's why I have to pick season 3. Because you never forget your first love. There you go. Even though I kind of have. But anyway. All right. So we've broken bread about breaking bread. Let's get to the episode that topped the countdown now. The one that was directed by Rian Johnson, who had previously directed the episodes 51 and Fly, yay! As well as acclaimed movies like Blooper and Knives Out, and some maybe not so universally loved movies like The Last Jedi. Anyway, I'm not one of the haters. I'm not a lover either. I'm like, it's fine. But
it's a movie.
Yeah, it's a movie. I just, all the problems that other people have, you lost me with, Mary Poppins Leia. Otherwise I've been fine. And written, and this is the thing that kind of I had forgotten, that this episode was actually not written by Vince Gilligan. I mean, I'm sure he gave it the once over and probably tweaked and added things to it because all the showrunner creator dudes do that. But this was actually written by Moira Wally Beckett, who actually took home the writing Emmy for this episode. By the way, only she got the Emmy, not Gilligan, so it was her. Right. She had actually written 8 other Breaking Bad episodes, including, Gliding Over. Wow, look at that one. Gliding Over All, excuse me. Oh, and again, Fly. See, it's all about the Fly. I love that there are people out there who don't like Fly. Those people, they're stupid. But that's not the episode we're supposed to be talking about. We're talking about Ozymandias.
Yep.
And that would have been where I would have put in a clip, like I did with Suitcase. But I was talking to Kevin, I was talking to you about just before we started recording. All the clips I came across, there was no way I could edit anything to under like 4.5 minutes, and that just would have been too long on an audio only podcast. If this is something where it was a video cast and I could actually use the clip and not get sued within an inch of my life or something, I absolutely would have used it. So I mentioned I'd done some recapping, whatever, a million years ago. So I'm going to let 7 years younger Scott handle this part from this point on. So Kevin, I'm going to rely on you to help freshen everything up,
Sure.
And like I was telling you, I've removed me speculating about certain things because I was like, well, I know what happened. So let's go back to the title of this episode. And we talked about the poem earlier, and that reading that Cranston did for the promo or whatever. And I mentioned I put that even out on Facebook. And did I tweet it? I might have even tweeted it, whatever. About that poem and why the episode is titled what it is. Because Ozymandias, it tells a tale of how a once all-powerful king had been brought down. His empire was destroyed. And all that remained was the stony debris of dust and decay. Because all leaders, whether they're benevolent or ruthless, eventually decline. Kingdoms rise, but they inevitably fall. That is the story of Walter White. I've made this bad joke a million times before, and I'll make it a million times more. I tend to rename episodes as though they were Friends episodes, because Friends, the one thing about Friends is they name every episode the one where or the one with, whatever. The alternate title to Ozymandias, there's a lot of things it could be, by the way, and probably much better jokes than this because it's not really a joke. I just call it the one where Walt loses everything, because that's really what happens in this, So let's go to the beginning of it, which we have this opening, and I'm actually doing air quotes with my hands. I don't know why, because it's not a video cast. The opening flashback takes us back to when and where it all began, which is really the true beginning of Walt and Jesse's relationship. The former student and the chemistry teacher in his smock and undies. I always love that. And back then, Walt and Skylar were still the sort of couple that said, love you when they ended a phone conversation.
Yeah.
But the significant thing about this scene, it's not the naming of the as of yet unborn Holly, although one can say mentioning that child foreshadows the final act of the episode. It's the first time Walt has to fabricate a lie about, his new line of work. We actually see him practicing his cover story, choosing the right words, adding details that, as always, are unnecessary. Of course, he barely gets a sentence out when Skylar cuts him off with a blithe yet blissful acceptance of whatever his delay is. So forget the foreshadowing of the baby. That, to me, is the real hint of what's to come in the final act. And Kevin,
in addition to the lingering shot on the knives.
Well, yes. Right.
Which it purports to be a shot of the phone ringing, because she comes and picks it up, but the camera lingers on the knives before potting up to catch Skylar's face. And you're like, huh.
So we have the knives there, and then we come back to them later. So it's kind of like it's almost like what's the thing with the, I forget the name. Chekhov's gun?
Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's gun, kind of like that.
Chekhov's steak knives.
Yeah, Chekhov's steak knives. And how interesting, because Rian Johnson directed Knives Out. Anyway.
That's right.
Stupid. So Kevin, when Walt and Jesse and finally the RV, they each kind of pop out of existence, fade away. It's fascinating, and I don't know if it was intended or not. I'm going to say it was. It kind of leaves you kind of it's a certain poignancy there, because you kind of remember how comparatively innocent the beginnings of this, whole tragic saga really were when we could think back to, back in season 1 or even part of season 2. So it's just, and it's funny. And I think we're so taken with the fact of what they do here that there are little things that someone could be really needlessly dumb and want to nitpick. I would just look at them like, what do you want them to do? CGI? Shut up. Yeah, I can, yeah. Aaron Paul does not look exactly the way he did when he was filmed an episode 5 or 6 years ago, but he can pass for it. By the way, Walt's hair doesn't look the same either, because we know it has to be a goddamn wig at this point,
Yeah.
But I think it works dramatically, and especially especially anyone who's watching Ozymandias when it was first aired, we remember the previous episode, Tahajli literally ends in a rain of gunfire and a smash cut to black. Right? Or, wait, it cuts to black and the gunfire continues, if I'm not mistaken. Because we just hear it.
Oh,
and
then, I don't know. I mean, the last shot, it's Walt smashes himself down onto the car seat to protect himself.
Right.
I guess you do still hear gunshots.
Because they go to black and we still hear the gunfire continuing, and so we pick up again. And I guess if we were looking at that flashback, so we would say they didn't do this, of course, because it would have been needless and stupid, maybe. Because but I would say 16 months later, because that's actually, it's one of those things where you realize how much time has actually passed. In terms of the show. At this point, it's you go, wait, it's only been 16 months? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So once again, Tahajali refers to that little valley they're in there. It's once again the site of buried secrets and murder. Jack and the Aryan Brotherhood. They've already shot and killed Gomez by the end of the previous episode. And then at the beginning of this, we have Walt pleading for Hank's life. He's even offering his entire fortune in exchange for his brother-in-law's safety. But at this point, Hank knows what the deal really is, even if Walt once again is in some form of denial. And then you have this great line, a little bit, this would have been a clip, but don't have it. But it's when Hank says, "What, you want me to beg? You're the smartest guy I've ever met. And you're too stupid to see he made up his mind 10 minutes ago." I mean, I love that they gave that Hank and Dean Norris probably one of his best lines in his last scene. I mean, it's really hard to really top that one, I think.
Yeah, that's where you see, like, oh, that's a smart cop. He already knows the person.
And then it's
everything about the situation.
Right. He's sized up and he knows. I mean, there's no point to it at this point. And the fact that, Jack actually punctuates Hank's last words, which are, "Do what you're going to do," with a bullet to the brain. The fact that the decision is made not to even let him finish what he's saying. It's a great little touch there. It's like, oof.
Yeah.
Because it hits you just a little bit harder. Because guess what? We don't typically see that. That's not how it's usually done. And I love little touches like that. That's what Breaking Bad does. This isn't exactly how you usually see a moment like that.
Right.
So basically he takes a bullet to the brain, which I think causes Walt's own brain to just short out because he just collapses, in a state of like whimpering near catatonia. And it's interesting if you're one who, especially if you were watching the entire series back then, you'll remember that the way he looks and the way, on the ground to the side, he very closely resembles the way Gus Fring looked when he was reacting to seeing his own partner killed back in Kevin's favorite season 4. And of course, Kevin, having characters fall into a state of speechless shock is really nothing new on the show. But even though the Aryan Brotherhood is about to make up most of his money, Walt is still seething far more over Jesse. Because as far as he knows, everything that has happened, this is Jesse's fault. He knows that Jesse is a traitor, he's betrayed him to Hank, and that alliance is what has ultimately led to this ultimately tragic standoff at Tahajali. Now, it doesn't matter if one can say that the blame, it's really Walt's. Of course it is. The whole story of Walter White is about the decision that he makes, which are oftentimes bad, poor, or just out and out immoral, and what the eventual consequences of those crossroad moments are. I mean, geez, if you could play the game, if Walt had only, going all the way back to the very first episode, and if you want to be really silly about it, you can go all the way back to the first episode and say, hey, whose fault everything is? It's Hank's fault. If Hank hadn't been a self-aggrandizing goof,
showed him the money that you can get.
Yeah, it's Hank puts the idea in his head. It's all your fault, Hank. See what happens when you turn 50. Yeah, that's why I'm doing meth on the side now. So I mean, whatever. Oh, by the way, this is where I found when I refer to Todd as Matt Damon with a missing chromosome.
I always liked Meth Damon.
Oh, Matt Damon, that's nice. Because I just reading why I wrote it. Matt Damon with a missing chromosome steps in. Made me laugh. He steps in to give Jesse a stay of execution. So Walt is here robbed of his cathartic revenge. But as he wants Jesse to suffer the way, kind of what he just did, he hits him with the darkest secret of all. And here I'll do the quote again because I so wanted to have this clip in here. I watched Jane die. I was there and I watched her die. I watched her overdose and choke to death. I could have saved her, but I didn't. I love that it's delivered. They don't dress it up. They don't try to make it, they just make it very simple, terse, curt, and that's what it is. I could have saved her, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And we've been waiting for that shoe to drop all this time. And that, and it's funny that this episode is the writer and the director are the people who worked on Fly, because that was the only other time that comes to my mind where you think, oh, I think Walt might tell him. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the very few remaining mysteries of the show was, will Jesse ever find out about that? And up until he says it, you figure he's never going to find out. And then he does.
Right. And it's just one of those things, because I think many of us were speculating maybe it might happen. And then look, okay, it's not going to happen. But when he says, wait, and he actually, they have that moment like, oh man. Oh, by the way, that's me like, oh yeah, villain. Because at that, whatever fleeting moment of sympathy any of us might have felt for Walt, poof, it vanishes, just like the end of that flashback.
Yeah.
I guess in a way, it's kind of like Walt is kind of like a wounded animal here, and so he's lashing out the only way that he can. Because in his mind, he's holding Jesse responsible for Hank's death, as well as losing, $70 million or whatever it works out to be.
Right.
So I think, Kevin, in his mind, this little verbal kick to the gut, it's not just justifiable. I think he thinks it's justice, period. So over the next minute or two of the episode, I love this. It's like, it's almost like they decided, hey, let's put all our Easter eggs in one basket. And we'll do them. We're just going to have them all here. So, it's almost like a kind of a nod to several moments throughout the series. Like Walt's car running on empty is a nod to the RV running out of gas in 4 days out. Or 3 days out. No, I'm just kidding. Walt rolling the barrel money. Which is kind of reminds of his previous method of barrel transportation back in, a no rough stuff type of deal. So it takes us back all the way to season 1.
That could have been the final image of the entire series.
Oh yeah.
And I would have been satisfied. Just the power in just the pathetic rolling a barrel of money through the desert because he just can't let it go.
And even though they had music playing during it, and of course it's one of those perfectly nicely little chosen songs, like a country western thing, whatever it was, I can't remember right now. In my head, I was singing to myself, "Roll out the barrel." Anyway,
and meanwhile, we're 20 minutes in, 18 or 20 minutes into the episode. The credits finally just started.
I love when some shows do that. It's very uncommon. When it's very uncommon, it's done well. That's right.
Yeah.
There's a different show. There's an episode, I think it's of The Good Wife, where it's more than halfway into the hour before the credits happen, which is, and especially on a network show, it's like, wait, what the hell? That's bizarre.
Good Omens did like a half-hour intro once.
Oh God, The Good Omens. That's right.
And then there's like 10 minutes left.
That's right. Isn't there one that does it like literally right at the very end of a show? Is it Legion maybe? Or I feel like there's a Noah Hawley show that does that also. Does something crazy like that.
Legion sounds right. Yeah.
The only two shows I can think of that it might be. It's either a Noah Hawley show like Legion, or it was an episode of Mr. Robot. I figure it's one of those two. I just can't remember which it is. So if anyone knows out there, feel free to say it on Facebook, because you're never going to say anything, guys. Don't comment on anything. Oh, and one last Easter egg. And this is the one I think most people remembered when it aired. You know, anyone eagle-eyed viewer, you probably spotted a pair of pants, crusty and stiff in the foreground, which obviously recalled the iconic image of, you know, the flying pants back in the pilot of the show. So about Walt, and this is a problem of his. It's a problem of any character, but it's really a problem of his. Whenever anyone allows their emotions to get the better of them, to give in to baser impulses, you know, like anger, revenge, spite, you know, it invariably leads to no good. You don't have to be a disciple of Yoda to know that. That's right. I've made multiple Star Wars references on this podcast. I don't know why. But this has always been one of Walt's biggest weaknesses and flaws. You go back to his stubborn stance of remaining in the meth business, despite a number of opportunities to get out, to, killing Mike. But, I mean, Kevin, I think the same can even be said of Jesse, whether it be, you know, going after the drug dealers in Half Measures, or trying to burn down, you know, the White House in Confessions, or Gus. I mean, how else can you explain how he falls for Walt's scheme and Face Off? Or even the way Hank has operated as a rogue DEA agent for past several episodes. But notice that all these characters, they all do that, and nothing good comes of these decisions, right? And in this episode, you figure, okay, we're done with all that. No, look, it's Marie's turn. Oh, Marie. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Logically speaking, I think she absolutely should have waited for, you know, Hank to return home before forcing Skylar to tell her son the truth about, you know, his meth-making murderer dad, whatever. Because wouldn't you want to have Hank there, you know, not only to, like, fill in any gaps in Skylar's story, but, you know, maybe provide some support for the kid who's sure to be devastated by this, because you know he looks up to Hank. Wouldn't you want him there to help support the situation? You know, Hank could be like a surrogate dad in that moment. So the fact that one can quibble, and I don't know if there is a quibble really about, do you really need to tell the kid? Yeah, I can see both sides of that one, but not.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what she says. Do you want him to find out from some guy in a uniform?
Right. But still, you should wait.
I think I will disagree with you. I mean, he said dead to rights. She's sure it's done. He's probably called her before and said, I've made an arrest. It's going to be 9 hours before I get home because there's a lot of paperwork. And she also she now has the upper hand on her sister finally.
Oh, she absolutely does. But I think I think that's what's motivating what she's doing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
She's not doing this to look out for Walt Jr. or Flynn.
Oh no. God. And of course she even calls him Flynn. Right. Because she's all buddy now.
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember catching that. I was going, oh, that's a nice little touch. Speaking of nice little touches, there's another one that the writer makes, Wally Beckett makes here. She makes I like to call it a canny move, because she spares us needless and possibly endless exposition. There was an episode, I think, earlier in the season 5, where we're primed to. I think it's when Jesse is with Hank and he's going to do the whole confession, but we never see the confession. We see bits about it later on, but we never see it then and there, because we don't need to sit through all that. And here, we don't need to see Skylar telling her son the whole story. We just need the awful aftermath, which is what we get. So it's economy of storytelling, but actually makes it almost more powerful in a way.
For sure.
Because here, the pain of learning about what his father truly is, and by extension, what his mother is as well, that feels to me, it's like the next biggest crime after murder in this episode. That's right, bigger than taking the kid. Shows how much I care about kids, apparently. Because the kid, and by kid I mean Walt Jr. or Flynn, this is the one, he has his innocence ripped away from him. His family his family is a family of liars, and it lies in ruins. So I think she was wrong for how she handled all of this. I'll give her credit that yes, you don't want him finding out the wrong way, but it would have, you know what? I'm sorry. I think it would have been a while before the TV news would have caught wind of what happened. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just so anti-Marie, because I was always mad that she stole the spoon, whatever. I don't know. Because I love silverware. Why would you do that? All right. Anyway, is she wearing purple in that scene? I don't remember. All right. So
I don't remember.
So anyway, we'll leave Marie there. Fuck you, Marie. I wish someone had said that in the episode. It would have been excellent. Did Skylar ever say "fuck you, Marie"? She should have. All right. Not in this episode, but in an earlier one. So basically, this merciless episode, as I like to call it, presses on, and then we get the sight of a bruised, cut, and swollen Jesse, which at this point is like, I don't know, if I had a nickel for every time Jesse's been all swollen, beaten up looking, I'd have at least, 15 cents. Anyway, the knowledge is that it's been Todd delivering this punishment, which kind of maybe is recalling how Jesse kind of decked him back in the episode Buyout, which makes me think, oh, wait till Todd sees that videotape in an episode or so. I don't want to be hanging out with Jesse then. Anyway, as I think as we expected from the beginning of the episode, Jesse is going to be forced to cook once again, and they even have him chained up like some sort of puppet, which is kind of appropriate because in one way or another, that's what Jesse has been. You either be for Gus or for Walt. The one thing that I didn't predict at the time when I watched this episode was what their true method of coercion was going to be, which is going to be a photo of Andrea and Brock, the mother and son that Jesse cared so much about, that he's going to be cooking not to save his own life, but to keep, these are basically his last remaining loved ones safe because, his relationship with his parents, sucks.
Yeah.
And did we ever get back to that kid? I think did we get back to that, his brother in El Camino, or is that never, or did we never get back to him again?
I think he's off screen the whole time.
Okay, I couldn't remember, because I didn't rewatch it again for this. Because why would I? But here's the problem now. When you watch Ozymandias at this point, you've already seen the rest of the series. So you already know what's going to happen as far as Andrea is concerned. And the moment I saw the photo, I remembered. And I just felt like that pit of my stomach kind of feeling like, oh, that's right. Ooh. Well, I'm going to have to watch that in about an hour or so. Oh no. That, by the way, that moment might be as hard, if not harder, than anything in Ozymandias to watch. And I know that's in Granite State, but oof, that's a bad moment. So let's get to what happens at the I love that I call it the White House.
The White House? Yeah.
Because, well, it is. So you have the showdown between Walt and Skylar. And of course, you mentioned those knives that we kept waiting to get used. Oh, and by the way, and apparently I said this 7 years ago, and it's funny because I didn't realize that when we were talking about them in the Mad Men podcast. The Walt showdown with Skylar, it's at the time I said it was a little reminiscent of Tony versus Carmela Soprano. Do you remember when they had their big fight in the house? I don't know if you've seen The Sopranos.
It's been too long.
They actually have a physic. There's the season where it really becomes about Tony versus Carmela, and it looks like they're almost about to get a divorce, and they actually have a physical confrontation in the living room and everything. And your friend, because yeah, Tony could kill her.
Yeah.
It's just kind of funny. I keep bringing them up. I know it's not an AMC show, but I'm just kidding. Anyway, so back to the scene. You mentioned the knives. What I love about the knife thing is that you've got the knives and the phone side by side. It's fight or flight. I love that. Take matters into your own hands, call for help. And the moment when Skylar slides out that butcher knife, when you're at least when you were watching this for the first time, I'm actually going to ask you right now. When you saw this for the first time, did you not feel a death of a member of the White household was inevitable in this episode at that point?
I think I was pretty sure we knew it wouldn't be Walt.
Well, yes.
But I thought somebody was getting real hurt.
I absolutely did. I wrote something really dark, by the way. But I remember, well, by the way, in case you haven't picked up, that's me. I'm totally going off notes now. I remember watching it then and going, "Oh God, I think Flynn's going to get involved. And it's going to be Flynn," because that would be but not don't kill Skylar just yet. Because I think there's still a few more episodes. You don't want to kill the wife just yet. Oh, but to kill the son, which is like the true innocent, because Skylar technically is not an innocent because she was a collaborator at one point. Maybe not anymore, but she was. Flynn is an innocent. And then it also made me go, see, Marie shouldn't have known. Anyway, shouldn't have done that. But when he jumps into the fray to kind of protect him, I was so sure that we would see that blade protruding from his chest. My horrible, horrible, horrible thought, I knew they weren't going to do this. That shows what kind of person I am. I thought maybe the knife might get sent hurtling through the air and then go right through Holly's eye socket.
Jesus.
And then she would actually, because I kept mentioning how Holly looks like the teddy bear. They have her dressed. She looks like the teddy bear from season 2. But the one thing that's different about the teddy bear is the teddy bear is missing that part of its head and its eye. But if you get a knife through it.
Oh my.
But, the writer didn't decide to do that either. So. But yeah, and that was of course, that's the moment where we get what the hell is wrong with you? We're a family.
The absolute climax of the entire show.
And Kevin, that is when Walt has the realization, yeah, you know what? You just lost your family.
Yeah. When
he sees the fear and loathing in his son's eyes as this kid is calling the police, it's, what do you have left now? Other than the remaining X number of $1 million you have in a barrel in a truck outside, you have nothing now.
And he knows it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this episode, in a way, it's like a series of betrayals in at least in Walt's mind. Because here, his son is betraying him. You go back to the beginning episode. His whole point was Jesse betrayed him by telling Hank. And then he felt, once he realized his son knows, now Skylar betrayed him by telling his son. And now his son is betraying him by calling the cops. Everybody's betraying, in his mind, everybody's betraying me. And what you can't get away from at that point, and even though we're a few episodes away from him saying, I did it for me, I did it because I liked it, in his denial-laden mind here, everything that he's done up until this point is now for nothing. Because if the guy who said he kept doing it for the family and to this, that whatever, it's like, well, guess what? They're gone, Yeah. So, well done, Walt. And again, acting, I said earlier, how he acts on emotion, not smart, rather than rational thought. He snatches up Holly. Okay. So, and gotta give Anna Gunn credit. When she runs out chasing after him on the street, that's one of those.
Her silent scream.
Yeah, there's something just so searing about that moment, and I was never. We didn't even mention this. Much the way people would dump on Betty and Mad Men, maybe actually more so, quite frankly. There was a lot of Skylar hate out there.
Yeah. During
the Breaking Bad years. I was not one of those haters. I found it kind of ridiculous because I would use all these other couples as examples. Like, you can't have this without that. You kind of need that. And and plus she's got lots of great moments. Like, how can you? I never understood the hating Skylar thing. It bothered it really bothered me that people really kind of there were certain people who just went after her. I didn't understand.
Yeah, it didn't make sense.
Because I was
it's just a nastiness for no reason.
Yeah, it's like, and I would go like, so, but you're not rooting for Walt anymore, but you don't like her anyway, even though at a certain point it's kind of like, oh my God, like that moment when they're in bed together and you can just feel it makes me ill just thinking about it, because it feels like it feels, well, let's face it feels kind of rapey. So let's just, call it what it is. But anyway, after he's taken Holly, and then later when Holly says "Mama," which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe we haven't didn't do a full rewatch, so I can't remember. I think that's the first time we hear her talk. I don't know if we've heard Holly talk before that. I think that's true. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I think that, which makes it that much more significant, the first time we hear her speak, she says "Mama." I think. Not positive. I could be wrong.
I'm not sure one way or the other, but boy, is that brutal. I mean, even the kid is good in this. Even the baby.
Oh, yeah. And again, by the way, I'm going by 7 years earlier, Scott. So if it's wrong, blame him, not me. It reminds me of I was thinking about using notes I wrote 7 years ago as the basis for my recap. I remember going, hey, so if you traveled back in time, and I don't know if you were in another person's body, or maybe you just had some sort of slight shape-shifting device. I don't know if you're quantum leaping it, or you can change your appearance. But let's say it's a scenario where you end up in a class with your earlier self. If you cheat off yourself on a test, is it really cheating? If you're this is the way. These are the things I think about. Thanks, COVID.
It's going to keep me up tonight.
Thanks, COVID. So, but at that point, when the baby Holly says "Mama," that's when Walt realizes not just what he has done, but what he has to do. And here we have what I feel. And you can correct me if, go on your own thing if you think otherwise. This is where we get to hear, this is the biggest reason for that opening flashback. Because even if we don't see it, like, those other bits of exposition I mentioned earlier, you can almost guarantee Walt is about to spend the next, who knows, let's say a couple hours, crafting and rehearsing what's likely to be his biggest or most important performance since either it was that weird videotape confession he did, or you can even go back to when he first puts on his Heisenberg hat. This is going to have to be, this is Carnegie Hall. this is the big one.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. When I went back and I looked at reactions way back when, whatever, the fact that there were, I'm not going to say, oh God, I don't believe it was the majority of viewers. No, it could not have been the majority of viewers. But there were actually some people who didn't get what was happening in that final phone call scene.
That shocks me. Because, I mean, for the first 2/3 of it, for the first 1/3 of it, nobody knows what he's doing. For the middle, if you've been paying attention to Walt, you know exactly what he's doing.
Right.
But by the time he's wrapping up, you gotta know.
You have to know. Right.
And then I guess Saul mentions it in the next episode.
Right. Absolutely. Which is,
which clears it up entirely.
But I remember the next day and being online, whatever, and looking up stuff and be going, how did, same what you just like, how did you not get that? And again, same thought. It's like, I get maybe you didn't get it at the very start, but there are a bunch of little moments and things he says which you should be going, oh, I know what he's doing.
Yeah. What he is doing for the audience is he's giving Skylar an alibi. He's giving her a defense. He's putting on record with law enforcement listening and a tape they can play back in court that she was not part of this.
Right. I mean, it's clearer than the purest crystal meth, man. Come on. He knows from the get-go that his son called the police when he ran off with Holly. So he knows absolutely they're going to be there listening to the call. I mean, that's standard practice. Of course he knows that. And if you're not picking up on little key things he's saying early on in that conversation, I mean, good gravy. When he says when he said, I warned you for a solid year, there would be consequences if you crossed me. It's like, wait a minute. You've never said that ever.
Right.
But it's interesting because when you watch that whole phone call, that not so phoned in phone performance, as I like to say, the section of the call where Walt is, just to try to build up the credibility of how she wasn't part of any of this and the way he was treating her, he's basically mocking her for all the whining and complaining. It kind of also functions as kind of a little bit of a knee to the groin to that I hate Skylar crowd that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And yes, that's what I wrote 7 years ago. I didn't come up with that just now. But it's also, I think that is really when Skylar catches on to what's happening. I have to say this, in an episode with Jesse, but Jesse does not get to say bitch in this episode. But he never got to say it with the kind of cruelty that Walt uses it when Walt spits out stupid bitch in that call. I mean, we know it's an act, but it's a very convincing act.
Yeah, you can just hear the spittle.
Actually, I when you said spittle, I actually reflexively just wiped at my face. It doesn't want to spit. It makes no sense. I wish this was a vidcast because people would have, it's like, he didn't actually spit on you, right? and I think it's when Skylar responds, I'm sorry. That's when he knows that she knows.
Yeah, message received.
What he's doing. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's why you see that's when the emotions really kick on his side. When the tears start, he's his latest not altogether true confession. But it's like what you said, because, if last time he did something along these lines was about self-preservation, this time it's to protect Skylar so she can raise Flynn and apparently Firehouse Holly. It's the same firehouse from This Is Up. No, anyway. So, and as we close that episode, the sun rises on the end of this. Walt boards that little minivan, and we know from previous episode, he's going to be taking it to his new life. And wait, what license plate was on the car? I guess he must be going to New Hampshire. At least that's what we thought at the end of that episode. We didn't know he was just be basically in the basement of an actual vacuum cleaner store for the next several days. By the way, at the end of the episode, and I see my notes, I had written, this was about as laugh-free as any episode of Breaking Bad has ever been, which is why there's no Saul Goodman in this episode.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing that could have made this episode better. So, no, I'm just kidding. So instead of getting a perfect 10 on IMDb, it would have gotten like a 10.1. Anyway. So it's, it's interesting when I think about the two episodes that we've talked about on this podcast. Because last time we talked about The Suitcase, easily the best episode of Mad Men. Here we're talking about Ozymandias. In my mind, in many, easily the best episode of Breaking Bad. Some might want to make a case for one or two others, which I can see it. But I think Ozymandias is just the perfect one. And what I think is interesting is that they're both so great and perfect, but for in such different ways and reasons. And I had said when we talked about The Suitcase, I think that's actually my favorite hour of television. But I'm curious how I'll feel when I watch Ozymandias again, because that's also like my favorite, which is it going to be? I'm almost torn for different reasons. I'm guessing I know which one you'd pick, and that's probably the one you should pick. But but I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I
after
don't know.
rewatch, I had the shakes on my rewatch of Ozymandias. However, the Suitcase, you could have never seen an episode of Mad Men, and you sit and watch that, and you'll pretty much completely get it.
Right.
Even with you'll catch on real quick who everybody is. Even if you don't fully get it, you'll understand enough. This kind of starts mid scene. You have to have seen every episode. That doesn't
Take away from
disqualify it as better,
Yeah.
but that is an important distinction, I think. But I mean, in terms of the power of the medium, it's got to be Ozymandias.
Interesting. I would say the Suitcase kind of represents a near perfect encapsulation of what that show was up to that point and that relationship between Don and Peggy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Ozymandias, on the other hand, is more like a culmination of everything that has happened up until this point.
Yes.
It's stuff reaching its ultimate point of, climax or whatever. So the situation with Hank, the situation with Jesse, and the situation with his family, bing, bang, boom, whatever.
It is the point of no return in so many cases, where other shows, you would get to the precipice of that, and then it would pull back and be like, don't worry, we're not going all the way down that road. But it just keeps doing that.
Right.
It's like it's over.
It's an episode that feels like, if it had an extra 5 minutes on it, oh my God, this must be the final episode of the series. And you realize, oh no, we've got a couple more hours
It's
to
not
give
one,
you.
but two more.
We didn't say penultimate, we said anti-penultimate, even though apparently some guy on some geeky website years ago kind of ruined it for me.
Totally ruined that for you.
Google didn't tell me that. Fuck you, Google. I'm going to Bing next time. So it's, and just so you know, when I was talking to you earlier about, how my copious notes, whatever, literally for this, I just wrote Ozymandias versus the Suitcase, because I feel I'm so comfortable about that. I don't need to have anything written about them. So I pulled that encapsulation thing right out of my fucking ass. It's tough. I feel there's a lot of reasons to pick Ozymandias. And, I know I hear the voice in my head. I know as I wear my Walter White shirt as I'm recording and everything, I'm like, I don't have a Suitcase shirt. But I think I'm still gonna, I gotta say, I think I'm still oddly gonna pick the Suitcase. I mean, because of it just being, I've used it, it's kind of like when I was trying to explain away when I, picked that episode of Buffy for the countdown, whatever. I feel I could show someone it's like what you said earlier. If someone who's never seen Mad Men, I was like, okay, just watch this episode. Yeah, you'll get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone, of course, could watch Ozymandias, but I feel it's like, I feel there's a lot that won't land the way it should if you haven't seen everything leading up, which is is in no way, shape, or form a knock on the episode.
No, not at all.
Not at all. But it's just, I just think the Suitcase just works as, I'm going to be really annoyingly highfalutin now. It almost works better as just a singular work of art to me, as opposed to Ozymandias, which, I don't know. Maybe the Suitcase is just a perfect short story, and Ozymandias is like one of the great last couple chapters of a book that you've loved all along, or something. I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, if a new viewer saw Ozymandias first, like if they stumbled on it at night by accident, they would not feel the need to go back and watch too much of the show leading up to it.
Right.
Because a lot of it would be boring and they know exactly where it's going. If you watch The Suitcase, you want to know how they got there.
Right. Also,
and it wouldn't spoil it.
Right. Oh, by the way, also, if someone watched Ozymandias and they'd never seen the show before, that might be the kind of person who might not get what's happening in that phone call. Maybe they might have an
That's
excuse,
the only excuse.
even though I think they should even get it, but they might.
Yeah, if you watch Skylar's face, like
Yeah, there's one. That's we always call it great face acting. Even though there's something kind of weird with Anna Gunn's face for a while there on the series, but we're not going to get into that. It's like why did you do that? I don't know. Anyway, so I'd mentioned the last time when we were talking about the suitcase. It's like, okay, this is actually one of the instances where the episode that's absolutely my favorite episode of the series is the one that made the countdown. That's also the case with Ozymandias for me. That is not to say I don't have other favorites. I am assuming you do as well. I've already hinted I have a list, so I'm probably just going to read off the list. But I will let you. Would you like to mention any of? And by the way, mention as many as you want, because you know how long I'm going to go on for. What? I know.
Yeah, I mentioned Face Off. We're talking episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, Face Off is. I mean, you saw the title in the listing before you watched the episode, and it's like, ooh, Gus, Walt is going to face off with Gus, and then the end of the episode is like, oh, it meant something else as well. And I remember watching that at home, and twice I went, oh! First you do it when you realize what Gus realized, and then you do it about 45 seconds later when you see the Greg Nicotero makeup job on Gus. I love half measures. I like full measures, except something AMC did that night messed it up for me. It led into a sneak preview of the pilot for Rubicon.
Right.
And they sent a signal to DVRs to record it as all one thing. So I'm watching, and I paused to go to the bathroom or something, and I saw like, oh, there's an hour and 10 minutes left. It must be a double episode. So then Walt shoots Gale, and I'm like, oh my God, the second half of this episode, this finale is going to be amazing. And then one commercial break later, I'm 3 minutes into Rubicon, and I'm like, oh my God, the episode ended, and I didn't like feel it right.
Oh,
like, when you play a favorite song of yours and you're like, oh, I'm not appreciating it, I got to rewind.
Right.
So that happened to that one. But other ones, I love Salud, the poolside flashback, maybe it's not the flashback episode, but it's when Gus gets his tequila revenge. Not audio. Crawl Space, which I think is also season 4, isn't it? Which ends with the scariest maniacal laugh from Walt, where you're like, oh my God, this guy's a problem.
I don't mean to interrupt your thing because I want to hear more. If I had done a separate list of just top 10 best endings of a Breaking Bad episode, that might be top 3, if not, or maybe even top 2. That's a tough one. It's such a great ending. Oh, oof. I'm literally looking at the photo of the end of the still from the ending as I'm saying that and going, oh, I love that ending so much. Anyway, carry on.
I love 1 minute. Because, you're just like falling off your couch with tension in that parking lot. And then I think I forget the title of 509. It ends with Tread Lightly. And the amazing thing about that scene is that in the year after Gliding Over All, when we see Hank have his literal holy shit moment, we assume, oh wow, the back half of the season is going to be this cat and mouse game as Hank tries to confirm his theory that maybe Walt is Heisenberg. But no, one episode in, he essentially goes up and tells him so.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And that's when you're like, oh my God, I have no idea where this season is going.
They are. And in more ways than one, they are cutting to the chase.
Yeah.
They're getting right to, in fact, no, they're cutting past the chase.
Mm-hmm.
I was skimming through my list here because I was thinking if I somehow did not have that in my top 25. I'm surprised. All right. Anyway, cool. Any other ones, or you want to take it?
Those are the ones.
Those are great.
I mean, if you gave me 3 more hours, I would
right.
eventually get through all 62.
I don't think there's a clunker in the bunch. So
I am not a fan of Rabid Dog.
I understand why you're not a fan of Rabid Dog, but
I will forgive it because of it sets up chess pieces for the most consistently amazing 4 back-to-back episodes in television history. So I forgive it, but watching it, I was like, ugh, I don't know about this.
I would say if I had to, of the second half of season 5, that would probably be the quote-unquote weak link of the episodes. So I don't disagree. It's kind of like when you've got a lot of things ranging from A- to A+, you got a kind of a B- in there, but it's still, is it better than most things I'm going to watch on TV? Still, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's like an 8.0.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's a comic book, that's amazing. Oh wait, what am I talking about?
Yeah.
Anyway, so while you're talking about I'm not talking about listing the episodes. So just so you know, because they're not, because I'm gonna do a quick, I'm gonna blow through my actual top 10 here. But just so you know, so the ones that you mentioned that weren't in my top 10 or list, whatever. Full Measure came in number 13 on my list, and Salute came in number 17 on my list. So for me, again, I get to cheat because I did this well in advance. Oh, and just even though I'm giving a top 10, I'm going to cheat one more time. The finale did not make my top 10. The finale,
interesting.
The finale was number 11 on my list, which is kind of crazy. And I only wrote one sentence about it. Imagine I was this concise with everything I did. Because everything is why it made my list. It's the series finale. Every loose end is tied up like a hangman's noose or a heroin addict's rubber tubing. That's what I wrote for. Get these short ones. Okay, number 10 on my list was Dead Freight, for episode 5 from season 5.
How did I not list that? Damn it!
I mean, it's
it's perfect.
I only wrote 2 sentences, but I'll cut it down. It's like, I'll just say what I wrote. It's a great heist. It's a thrilling caper, and just like the magnet scheme that started off the season, it's the brainchild of one Jesse Pinkman. It's like what you were saying earlier. And however, there's that one thing that Jesse didn't plan for. And that shocking moment is what really hauls Dead Freight into my top 10. That's right. I said hauls. That's right, because I'm amazing. Anyway, so number 9 for me was Crawl Space. That was, it was just Walt's panic justifiably growing, especially after being tased, dragged out into the desert, and having to realize that the entire White family threatened by Gus. And then he finally feels it's time to make use of, the man who makes people disappear. But when he discovers most of his nest egg has been given to Ted to pay off his IRS debt, we get, look, I wrote it here. We get the creepiest and possibly the most iconic closing shot of the entire series. Oh, you're right 7 years ago, Scott. Anyway, I'm not going to read the descriptions for all of them. Number 8 was 4 Days Out, episode 9 from season 2. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at what I wrote here. I'll just mention Jesse's love for Funyuns. It's also, I didn't remember this. It's also the first time Walt dismisses the idea that this is all for his family, asserting all he's ever done is worry and disappoint them with his litany of lies. We also find that Walt's cancer is in serious remission. Oh, is that the one? Oh, and he doesn't care much for towel dispensers. That's right. That's when he punches the towel dispenser that we return to in a later episode.
Oh, yeah.
Number 7, probably the one somewhat controversial one in this, because, people are idiots, whatever. Number 7 was Fly. Just what I've talked about. I love Fly. I people who don't like him, like, I don't like you. Okay, so there. Number 6. Come on. Better Call Saul. Come on, episode 8, season 2. It's Better Call Saul. This episode
and yet not a backdoor pilot.
Yeah, well, no, it's a slowly gestating. Very slowly. Hey, look, it's like what I said before. It's the reason I gave the show a chance in the first place, because I found out about Odenkirk being on the show. So if this episode didn't exist, I might not have ever watched Breaking Bad. What did I write here? Wow. A quick binge later, I was hooked like an ATM stealing meth monkey. That's very nice. Number 5 is Half Measures. I mean, wow. Like I said, it's that monologue. It's just the Mike moment is just wow.
Yeah.
Number 4, it's the pilot. You gotta have the one that started it all.
All right.
It lays the foundation. It's like people who don't mention Star Wars as one of the best Star Wars. And it was like, first of all, don't call it A New Hope, you idiot. It's Star Wars. Fuck up. Anyway. All right. So that's number 4. No, number 3, you mentioned it, 1 minute. I mean, wow. It's just such a wow thing. The whole thing with Hank and the cousins. What did I write here? It's not the first jaw-dropping final scene to appear on the list, but many would justifiably identify it as the best. Yeah, I mean it's so amazing. And the thing, and don't forget, that's also the episode with what Jesse does in the hospital bed. The whole spiel he does, the anti.
Yes,
it's the same. It's the same episode. So it's such a powerful episode. It's so good. Number 2 is Face Off. So
yeah,
there you go. I mean, what did I write? When it comes to season finales, Breaking Bad didn't write the book, but at the close of the 4th season, they took the old book, ripped off its cover, shredded each and every page, doused it in lighter fluid, and roasted a succulent Los Pollos Hermanos drumstick over it. Has there ever been another hour of television that could continue to build white-knuckling tension minute by minute while also cramming in several laugh-out-loud moments? An episode that could shock us not only once but several times. A story that could have conceivably ended the series, but also served as the launching pad for the actual final season. You don't need to be Saul Goodman to make a could-have-been number 1 case for several of these episodes, but this was when it still felt acceptable to be rooting for Walt. I wrote, I never stop at most rational-minded people. And vanquishing a foe like that appeared to be indestructible and unstoppable. It was like knocking off Darth Vader or Voldemort. And how do you top that? But it turns out only one episode did. Boom, Ozymandias. There you go. Huh. That's Scott's top 10. And that's... I don't really have much else. I'm kind of tapped out.
I'm with you.
So yeah, that kind of brings to an end, or a close, the greatest TV drama episodes of all time countdown. We ended with Ozymandias. I am amazed that there were people who didn't see that one coming. Probably most did. A friend of the podcast had contacted me a couple of weeks ago saying he still couldn't figure out what number 1 was. And then when he finally saw what I posted, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought you guys had covered Breaking Bad." It's like, no, we didn't cover Breaking Bad. We've only been around since 2014. You can confuse Better Call Saul. Not possible. All right. So,
well, congratulations.
Yay.
To the end.
There we go. So, for the folks out there who might be asking, hey, what's next? What's next on the podcast? So, I'll tell you this. We do plan to cover the upcoming Disney Plus Marvel series Loki. I believe the first of 6 episodes is going to be released on Wednesday, June 9th. Wednesdays are not the most convenient of release days, but hopefully and by we I mean actually me and Dan, unless there's a week where he's unavailable, then probably Brian or Jamie will step in, unless all 3 or 4 of us do it, I don't know. But we'll try to record either that Wednesday or Thursday night so we can get it to y'all on Fridays. If there's an unexpected delay, then maybe Saturday, but hopefully Fridays, you'll get our podcast covering Loki. And it's only 6 episodes. I love short series. It's so nice. But that's only 6 weeks. There must be something more, right? So there are a few shows that we've already committed to covering at this point, but we're not really sure when they're going to come out. It's kind of a problem. Like in 2021, supposedly the 3rd season of The Boys is going to come out in 2021. And supposedly the 3rd season of Doom Patrol is going to come out. We just don't know when. We know that they're happening. They're filming them right now. So odds are it's going to be sometime in the last few months of the year. We just don't know for sure. Will one of them pop up in September, or might be as late as December? Who knows? Those are both shows that also deal with a considerable amount of post-production, which also can delay things as well. And also my hope is when they both come out that they don't actually overlap, because that would kind of suck. Umbrella Academy, Perry Mason, they are, as far as I've heard, they are not even at the filming stage yet. They are not happening this year. I would guess if for one or both, we're looking at mid or more likely late 2022, I would think. And then there's this other show that we've covered since the beginning on this podcast. And I know a certain guest co-host isn't allowed to say anything about when it's coming back. Yeah. So Better Call Saul. I can only, just for my own peace of mind, I can only go by the history of the show. Now, number one, 3 of the past 5 seasons were released at some point in February. So one might say, oh, February might be likely for it. Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. I know you can't say anything, Kevin. Don't worry.
Okay.
Hey, if you want to give us a scoop, I don't think you can.
It will not be 2021, but that's
that. Well, I knew that. Look like I'm not here to smack you. So on one hand, logically, I could say, oh, it could be February. I also looking at the AMC stuff a little bit, getting into your business here, Kevin. I know that, in the back half of 2021 and then going into 2022, you've got that final mega season of Walking Dead. And I think they're going to come back in 2022 for like the final 8 episodes of Walking Dead or something like that. Or maybe but that might be what's tentatively planned, but who the hell knows maybe COVID will screw something up. Who knows?
Well, that's a Sunday show. Saul's a Monday show, but. Right.
But I've noticed that they like to kind of have those two things coincide. They've had those two things coincide a number of times. That
they have, yeah.
No,
I think, it's all out the window because of COVID.
Right. And the other thing I'm hoping that while I wouldn't mind the mega dose of Saul, part of me feels, because what they've done in the past, or at least once or twice, I can't remember how many, you would know better than I, that they'll premiere one episode of Better Call Saul on a Sunday night after a Walking Dead episode. And then they replay that episode and another new one the following on Monday. So they actually end up airing 2 episodes that week. And part of me thinks, you only got 1 season left. I know they expanded it to 13, which is awesome. But I'm thinking, don't waste it. Don't burn off 2.
It's also such a pain in the ass to figure out the voiceover copy for the promo for that.
There you go.
It's like 2-night season premiere starts Sunday, but then Mondays after what? This is too much information.
Yeah, it's just so complicated.
Yeah.
But like I said, again, getting to the point, I don't know for a fact when Better Call Saul is coming back. So for all I know, it could be early February. They once came back in April. There's another time they came back in freaking August. You never know. My assumption is if I'm betting, actually, I feel like it's going to be March. I don't know why, but I'm more likely, I'm thinking it's probably going to be February because that's just what it tends to be, but no guarantee of that. The point is, we're not going to be getting to it for a while, but it's also a factor to what it is I want to do. I'm my plan is that we are going to be doing a rewatch on this podcast for the rest of the year. And the show that we are going to be rewatching is Breaking Bad. This is going to be we're going to have a Breaking Bad rewatch on this podcast for the rest of the year. However, I gave it some thought. I have not spoken with Dan or Brian and Jamie, who, all of whom I think want to participate to some extent. Dan, I think, wants to do it as much as he can, but Brian and Jamie also, I think, want to participate. We may have guests on occasion. We may even get some guy who works at AMC occasionally. You never know. Well, after tonight, probably not. However, the thing that occurred to me was, because I was trying to figure out, do we do like 2 episodes every 2 weeks? Or then I was like, that's going to take too long. 3 episodes every 2 weeks. What's going to be too much? And then we want to be done before Better Call Saul comes back, because that could really screw things up. And then I thought, what if Boys and Doom Patrol both come back around the same time, and I'm doing multiple Breaking Bad episodes? Okay, I can't do this. So what we're going to do, or what my plan is, unless I'm convinced otherwise, is we're going to be covering Loki up until I think it ends in sometime mid to late July, I think, or mid-July. Yeah, mid-July. So August through December, each month, we're going to have a 1 mega cast, like our podcasts tend to be anyway, like this one, where we're going to cover a season of Breaking Bad. So August will be season 1, September season 2, and so on. That way, when we get to the end of the year in December, we'll be covering the final season. And hopefully, if it turns out Better Call Saul doesn't, comes back in, February, it's not that long a wait. And we'll have and they'll also give us more flexibility if we want to cover anything else that might pop up on the horizon unexpectedly, which has happened a number of times on this podcast where, this is a good show, we should do this for the podcast, kind of a thing. So I just feel it gives us a bit more flexibility that way. And that is the plan. Again, you guys who are listening to this are actually hearing it before I've discussed it with the other people involved in the podcast. So, but why would they mind? They only have to commit to like 5 podcasts instead of, because I was doing the math. Do we do 21? Do we do 22? Do we do 32? I was like, oh God, it's too many. I can't, my head's starting to swim. And that's basically it. Oh, the whiskey's really kicked in now. So, all right. So I'm going to get the wrap up done here because also, you know what it is? It's not the whiskey. It's because it's so damn hot in this room.
Yeah, it's a little sticky.
Yeah, I mentioned I had to turn everything off. Maybe you did too. I don't know. But I'm just like, oh my God, I think I've lost like 3 pounds. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, guess what? You'll enjoy hanging out on our podcast page as well. It's our Facebook page is what I'm trying to say. It's a serious TV drama podcast where you can like the page and discuss and talk about shows such as Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul or pretty much anything else that you like to talk about there. You can also, what else can you do? You can subscribe to our feed on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. They're the same damn thing nowadays. You can rate and review us there as well. But better yet, you can go to stvdpodcast.podbean.com where you can actually find all 300, and I did not look at what number episode this was going to be. Oh, God. 300 and... It's got to be at least 310 of these things. I don't remember. Sorry, guys. I should know. Let me see. 312. Oh, my God. 312 of these. Oh, my Lord. And finally, you can follow us on Twitter. You know what? I might look into getting us on Spotify. What the heck? We haven't had any legal issues since like last summer. I think maybe we can qualify for Spotify. Anyway, you can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. That's STVD as in serious TV drama. Oh boy. So, Kevin, sorry you had to sit.
Yeah.
Sorry you had to sit through that train right there. Thank you so much for joining me these last 2. I hope, if nothing else, you took an opportunity to rewatch some great episodes of some great series that that your network's kind of responsible for. So you got to be.
Yeah, we've been dining out on these for years now.
You got to be a good corporate man and everything. But Yeah, no, but I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah.
I am kind of I'm kind of eerily looking forward to a mutual friend of ours who I think will listen to this podcast. I don't know if she'll get this far into it because she's probably going to listen to the first 20 minutes and then text me saying, "Why did you talk so much? Why wouldn't you let him talk?" I was like, "Oh, shut up, leave me alone." You might know who it is.
I'm trying to guess.
I'll tell you after. I'm not going to say her name, but
All right.
yes. But you appreciate her both as a friend and as an artist. So we'll leave it. Oh, did you?
Oh yeah. Of course.
Yeah, of course.
That's why.
There you go. It's hanging on the wall somewhere. Anyway, everyone out there is like, why are they still talking? Wrap it up. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys out there for listening. I hope you enjoyed not just this podcast. I hope you enjoyed the entire countdown. It was a lot more work than I thought it would be, but I'm not complaining because hey, COVID gave me something to do. So I hope you guys appreciated it, and we will be back in a couple weeks with covering the first episode of Loki. It should be me and Daniel. That should be something special. All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. And thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you. Bye-bye.